Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Soul Chess in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 201, Nunnely's Favorite Hero. United States of Japan. With her newly acquired spiritual power, though not yet understanding what it was, Colin left the house yet again, but by now the sun was going down. However, before she got to the front door, her mother stopped her by calling out to her. "Colin." "What?" Colin said, standing in place at a distance from the door where she could reach out and open it. "I don't know what's going on, but I'm your mother. If something's bothering you, sweetie, you can talk to me." Colin sighed and slumped her shoulders. "You wouldn't understand. This is about what happened a few days ago, isn't it? Just like back then, you're leaving without saying anything to go off on a strange adventure. So what?" "Colin, I know you don't think the best of me. I haven't been the best mother to you, wanting to stay near you for my own selfish reasons, never giving you proper advice. I've been stuck since Naoto died. But, honey, please, whatever you do, don't end up like your brother. Don't leave me crying in front of two gravestones. Danger has always been a part of my life since before I graduated elementary school," Colin stated. "I'm used to it by now." "That doesn't mean you have to actively seek it," Colin's mother told her. "What would you know?" Colin said, turning sharply to face her mother, speaking harshly and scowling harsher. "We're only living together because I can't support myself and because I didn't want to live in father's house anymore. I'm Japanese and so are you. You haven't been the best mother. I know you've been trying, but that's the truth." Colin pulled in her right arm at her side and gripped her fist. "I'm a warrior, a seeker of combat. I fight to solve my problems. That's the kind of person I turned into." Colin stopped speaking harshly and her face turned to one of regretful anguish. "This is something I have to do. I know you've been really disappointed in me these last 2 years, but after what happened to Ogai, what happened 2 days ago, there's no one I can really talk to you, and you have no idea what I've been through in the last 4 years. No one could ever understand what I've been through. Don't you see? I have to go. I have to find out who I really am. Am I a warrior who fights for virtue, and in that case I should join the military, or am I just a girl who needs to get her normal life back on track? I can't answer that question." Colin's mother smiled at her. "Kojiki, Colin is a strong girl with a brave heart and soul. She does what she thinks is right. You may not be everything of how I expected you to turn out, but that part of you I know is the girl I helped raise." "Mom," Colin said almost in a whisper. "Colin, if this is something you have to, then do it, but please," Colin's mother's expression became worrisome, "don't leave me all alone. Now that your father's left me, you're all I have left." Colin nodded with a vigorous expression and then left the house. She fired up her car and went back to the storage facility only to remember she had no idea what to do next. She stood outside the garage that housed the Gurren and looked down at her arm as she let it hang at her side, palm outspread. Unsure what to do next, Colin went over by the dock and sat down. "Well, now what?" she asked. "This sensation I'm feeling, I'm willing to bet this is what that woman, Arisawa Tatsuki, referred to as spiritual power, but how do I utilize it?" She stood up after a moment of straining her brain for ideas. "Well, if the world's already gone to hell and back like something out of a fictional universe, maybe I should try adapting to those laws that I know." Colin tensed up her muscles and cupped the edges of her palms together. She tried her best to put all of the shifted weight in between her hands. She then thrust them forward. Hadoken. Colin stood in the firing position with nothing happening and no release of spiritual power at all, and she felt incredibly silly, face flushing in embarrassment. "Okay, let me try something else." Colin stood with her legs spread apart, fists at her sides, eyes closed, trying to find her inner center. She was about to compare spiritual power to the ancient folklore of Ki to see if it worked. Colin tensed up her muscles and kept her mind at peace with itself, focusing only on the beat of her heart and her inner self. She opened her mouth as the inner, mental tension began to rise and then began to let out a scream of pride. As Colin built up muscular tension and opened her eyes, she could feel the spiritual power flowing in her body. "Yes, now this is more like it." Colin could feel the planks beneath her feet begin to give way. She leapt backwards only to find she leapt all the way to the concrete as the pier sank into the ocean. She felt the tension leaving her, but she quickly got back into position and continued to charge her spiritual power from square one. Hey, Colin emitted her voice as she continued to let pressure and tension build, doing her best to mimic what she saw on TV. The concrete cratered beneath her feet in small little imprints, small big enough for a mouse to sit in. The volume of Colin's voice rose as she continued to feel the tension and the pressure. She was slowly lifting her arms up towards her shoulders as if lifting a very heavy weight. Small chunks of dirt and pebbles began to be lifted into the air as wind was suckered in towards Colin's body. I've got it, just a little more. Any moment my hair should. Thwumph. Colin's hair shot straight into the air from the wind beneath her feet. Awesome, and now, Colin extended her arms outwards at her sides. Release. Colin let go of her Ryuryoku in the directions of her arms, the pressure waves tearing up the concrete she was standing on and shooting out for several straight meters to either side. Colin panted. Yeah, that's definitely like what I saw. She began to feel woozy. Oh, my head. Colin clamped her forehead. Did I overdo it? My body's so weak. What Colin didn't understand was that the theory of ki was not like spiritual power. Although she'd charged the energy, by releasing it, she'd also released her body's inner energy and therefore was now weaker than when she first started. She was now, understandably, tired, but it had been a good way to confirm that she did in fact have spiritual power. Her body drained, Colin dropped to her knees, collapsed on the ground in a heap. 12th Division. On the monitor screen, a zoom-in on Earth and an anomaly alert began beeping in front of the desk of one of the division members. Akon senpai, he called out. Akon came waltzing over. He looked at the monitor. Spiritual anomaly. It's definitely human, sir, the division member told him. Shall I send someone to investigate? I'll alert Patrol Corps. This is something they should be aware of. How strong is the signal? Well, right now it's barely at an unseated officer level, but a short while ago, the division member pulled up a graph that showed the Ryutsu level of the area in question and clocked back into the negative x-axis from when the alert first showed up. It was almost 5th seat level. Akon blinked and stared. Oh my, is something going on? Akon whipped his head around. He saw Jin leaning against the inside of the doorway, hands out of his haori sleeves and in his pockets. Ichimaru Teiko. Jin used Shunpo and landed next to Akon. So, what we got, Akon-san? He asked, looping his arms behind Akon's neck and the member in front of the computer. See for yourself, sir, Akon said, gesturing to the computer screen. Jin's eyebrows raised with interest as he leaned forward to take a look. And you're gonna bother 2nd Division about this? Of course, sir. It is their responsibility. Now let's not make a fuss, Jin said. Can we get a visual? A visual? Akon asked. Yes please, Jin said, holding out the Ian please. A visual was soon granted, showing one passed out Kojiki Colin on the ground in a heap. Akon and the monitor member were taken in by how attractive she was. Jin shoved them aside so he could see. Well, that's not too surprising. Sir. Akon-san, I want ya to file a report. I'm gonna take care of this. Yeah, don't need to go bother the 2nd Division. Jin walked over to the terminal next to the one being used and pulled up a database that he had an access password to. He then punched in a few settings and gestured for Akon to sit down. We have that chick on file, he said as Akon sat down and saw what Jin had pulled up. Her name is Kojiki Colin. She's of interest to Lelich. Akon began reading the profile from the top. Jin slapped him friendly on the back. Emma, go retrieve her and bring her to Lelich as a present. He'll be so surprised. But, Sir, Akon spun around in his chair. Jin stopped walking. Akon-san. Why yes sir, the blunt way Jin had addressed him was unsettling. Jin turned his head over his shoulder and opened his eyes a crack. Are you disobeying a direct order from your Teiko? W.H. Watt. And no sir. I was just stating an opinion. If your opinions mattered you'd be the one we're in discode. Jin shut his eyes. Got it. Why yes sir, Akon sweated. Jin smiled and began to leave with a wave. Bye-bye Den. He left with Shunpo. First Division. So, we're all in agreement about this plan? Lelouch asked, clacking together a 6-page, double-sided document. Everyone either nodded their heads or gave utterances of approval. Spectacular, Lelouch said plainly. He handed the document to Urahara. Run copies of this and bring it to 2nd Division so they can distribute it to proper personnel. Why do I have to do it? Urahara whined. Because, Lelouch said, biting down on the second syllable, Talbumasuk isn't trusted and Byakuya Teiko, Anohanasu Teiko, and I all have divisions to run. You're a free agent. I didn't say do it now. Lelouch looked out at the dark sky. He could see clearly through the window. It's pretty late. So, tomorrow we begin proper preparations. Talbumasuk asked. Indeed, Lelouch nodded, giving the most serious he could look that could be mistaken for a scowl. We have tomorrow and the next 2 days to store up and prepare for war. We need to be at 100% if we want to charge at Aizen with everything we've got. The others seemed to nod, and with that all 5 Soul Reapers separated and left. As Lelouch and Talbumasuk began to split in separate directions, the ex-Arrancar Lord looked at him. You're not coming home. I have business to take care of at the division first. I'm sure Ranjiku's been neglecting her paperwork as usual, and I'd like to have my office tidied up. Tell Susanna and Shirley I might be spending the night there. All right, Talbumasuk nodded. They're certainly getting along well, Urahara said as both men took off. It's circumstantial, Byakuya told him. They have a common enemy to fight. Once this is over they'll certainly go back to hating each other. Anohana had a serious concerned look on her face. Is something the matter? Byakuya asked her. I was just thinking if we really are prepared for everything. We've done the best we can, Anohanasu Teiko, Urahara told her. The rest lies on us. Anohana took a deep breath. Some things are easier said than done. We are ready to defeat Aizen in theory, but should something go wrong we cannot adapt well against him. It'll be tough, that's for sure. Aizen won't go down easy, Urahara agreed. No, he won't, Anohana said looking up towards the moon and stars, and then repeated in her mind, no, he won't. 10th Division. Lelouch returned to his barracks and immediately made for Ranjiku's office. The door was wide open and, rather than finding a large stack of papers and Ranjiku nowhere in sight or the room smelling of sake, he found Ranjiku hunched over her desk, all of the papers in the out pile. Her head was tilted to the side with her breasts squashed against the desk. She was snoring and drooling on her calendar. I don't believe it. She actually bothered to all her work. Lelouch walked over to the out pile and grabbed a few papers at random. He examined them. And they're all correct too. He brushed Ranjiku's hair with the back of his hand. Thank you, Ranjiku. I appreciate it. He put his hand on her shoulder and rubbed it gently. Hey, he called down to her in a low voice. Ranjiku's eyes squinted hard for a little while before they slowly opened. Lelouch moved his hand away as Ranjiku sat up, yawned and stretched. Teiko? She asked, half asleep as she turned to look at him, rubbing her eye. You all right? He asked. Ranjiku yawned again. I only meant to take a little nap. She stretched again. What time is it? About 10 o'clock, Lelouch told her. What? I've been out for 3 hours. You were done since 7. Lelouch asked. Ranjiku said, still a little groggy. She gave Lelouch a big smile as she folded her arms on the desk in front of her. I wanted to prove to you that you can always count on me when it really matters. I'll remember that next time you try to get out of paperwork, Lelouch said with a smirk, thumb and forefinger extended under his chin. Ranjiku's smile vanished and she asked with a serious tone, so how'd the strategy meet go? Fine, Lelouch said, rubbing the back of his head. I'll start running drills tomorrow. He yawned. I need to get some sleep myself. You're staying at the division? Ranjiku asked. For tonight, yes. I still have some work to do in my office. Would you like some help? Ranjiku offered. Lelouch smiled. No, I'm good. You've done enough. Well, if you're sure, Ranjiku said, getting up. She yawned. I think I'm going to check in for the night and get a full night's sleep. Alright, Lelich said and left her office for his as Ranjika went into her bedroom. He found the door to his office closed all the way with a note on the door. Dear Lelich. Gotcha a present. Jin. Damn it Jin, this had better not be another one of your practical jokes, Lelich huffed as he got his keycard out to open his office door. Inside he saw the scattered stack of papers on his desk on his left and scanned his eyes about the room. Everything seemed to be in order. Nothing appeared to have been altered in any way as Lelich's eyes scanned from left to right. Desk, filing cabinet, potted plant, bookshelf, Colin on the couch, coffee table. Wait what? Lelich traipsed over to the backside of his couch where Colin was laying down, fast asleep. What the hell is she doing here? Further analysis of the situation indicated that, in contrast to 2 years ago and what Tatsuki had told him, Colin had spiritual power and enough to take on an eighth seed from what she was currently emitting. Lelich quickly grabbed his desk phone and called Jin up. Yeah, hello. Jin, why? Oh, so you found my present, did ya? Jin, why didn't you come to the meeting or go to the second division and let them handle this? Yeah, see, problem with that first part is, we were all under strict orders not to disturb the meeting, Jin stated. Lelich sighed. What is she doing here? Why did you bring her here? Why didn't you go to Division 2? I'm getting the distinct impression ya don't like my gift. Lelich could practically see the smile on his face. Jin, Lelich put strain in his tone. Oh, alright, I'll play nice. She was emittin' Ryatsu and we locked in on it. Figured you know what to do with her better than Kendra woulda. Why is she unconscious? Found her that way. Sure you did. I died, Jin whined, have a little faith in me Lelich. Did you do anything to her? What kind of pedophilic serial rapist do you take me for, Lelich? Lelich was silent. Don't answer that. I really did nothing to her, honest truth. MMMHMM. She was exhausted from trying to temper her Ryatsu. Ya might want to turn her over to Arisawa after ya done speaking to her. Goin' by what ya said at the captain's meeting, we'll all be running drills tomorrow, you won't have time to train her. Thank you Jin, I can think for myself, Lelich said. Just making sure ya weren't about to do it yourself over some friendship sentimentality since Arisawa-san has experience being a teacher in full bring. Lelich was silent. Lelich. Yeah, thanks, was all he said and hung up. By this point, Colin was finally starting to rouse from sleep. Her vision was hazy at first until she looked up at the unlit ceiling above her. Yoon, where am I? She heard the sound of footsteps from behind, but was too groggy to do anything about it as Lelich flipped the light switch. Ack! Colin exclaimed, grabbing a cushion and burying her face in it. When she finally could adjust, she looked across the coffee table to see Lelich sitting with his legs crossed, hands wrapped around his knee. He was wearing a black uniform and a white haori. That's a Soul Reaper uniform. I did it. I really have spiritual power. So, Lelich began, you managed to find a way to this world. A pleasure to see you, Lelich smirked, Q1. Lelich, Colin simply stared at him. One of my co-workers brought you to the Soul Society after you passed out from trying to temper your own Ryatsu. I found you here in my office. I just came back from a strategy meeting. Tell me Colin, what did you intend to do by trying to come here? Colin leaned forward and slapped the coffee table with her hand. I want to fight. She exclaimed. Lelich calmly raised an eyebrow. I have to fight. I came here to fight at your side, to fight for a cause I can sink my teeth into. Her strong eyes became anguished. I need to find out, what side of me is the real me? If you're having an identity crisis, why don't you talk to Ogai? What are you saying? Don't you remember what happened? Lelich looked confused. You murdered him when you your other self. I did what? Lelich asked as his eyes shrunk. Not just Ogai, but Violet Inu and their infantile daughter. I've also heard that the Phantom Killer, as you were called, attempted assassination on Nunnally and Zero and also Empress Sumeragi. And there's at least 50 more. How could you just forget something like that? Lelich palmed his face in horror. I attacked Nunnally. I killed an infant. Oh guy? At what cost did I stabilize my own future? Colin saw how pale Lelich had turned. Lelich. Lelich was shivering with fear. 50 more? What the hell? Lelich snapped out of it. Colin chastised. Lelich immediately stopped freaking out. Lelich, are you okay? No, Lelich answered, no I'm not, but I'll manage for the time being. Colin, tomorrow I'm going to bring you to Arisawa Tatsuki. She can teach you how to correctly utilize that power you've started to accumulate. Lelich said and headed for his desk as he opened a drawer and took out a piece of notary. Why can't you? Colin asked him. Arisawa-san is the better teacher. She has experienced what you're going through and you can learn better through example than through theory. When my business is taken care of, I can explain everything she can't afterwards. Also, Lelich said, signing his name on the note he had just finished scribbling. I need to speak with Cornelia about something important so I can make a proper memorial garden. Lelich. Lelich headed for his door with the note to give to Rangiku to start proper preparations without him. The people that Zero devoured, won't come back to life, Colin. What do you mean? Won't they be here? Lelich shook his head. He looked at Colin. When you're devoured by a hollow and the beast is cleansed, only the dominant mind retains its form, the rest of the souls are little more than bits of reishi scattered through the soul society. Lelich extended his arms outward a little. Oh Guy, Violeta and everyone else are a part of my soul now. Their lives live on within my very soul. What would happen if you were to die again? The souls would break down. I assume we would all be able to be reincarnated. I have such a scar on my soul now. This is something else I now must atone for. Colin, I'm bringing a note to my subordinate and then I am checking in for the night. If you find the couch not to your liking, wake me and I'll bring you to a guest spot in the barracks. Sure, Colin said. Lelich left and came back so soon later that Colin hadn't yet processed everything. Colin, he said as he was halfway across the room. Why yes? Colin asked, her stance rigid. Lelich smiled warmly at her, thank you for coming. Colin smiled with pride, you're welcome, Zero. The next day. Lamperouge House. The bed had been rather cold without Lelich around. It was the first time since marrying Shirley that Lelich had actually stayed away from the division for the evening. The two women were able to platonically use each other for comfort. Right now, Susanna was helping Yuna with her duties. The 7th Division captain was still recovering from her battle with Ichigo, but then again so were Ichigo, Kenpeki and Stefan. Shirley and Clovis were in class and Marianne was spending time with the other Royal Guard members, going over the battle plan. Yuffie was in her office. The only two people in the house, besides Lelich, were Nunnally and Cornelia. Currently the General-in-Chief and the captain of Squad 10 were talking about the deaths the latter caused as Zero over some morning tea. Yes, I can certainly get you a full report brought to your desk of the obituary list. Why didn't you ask me about it before? Lelich sighed. Lack of care, concern only about the end result. He stared at the liquid in his cup. Also I didn't think anyone important would actually get hurt. His face became anguished. I can't believe I attacked Nunnally. Cornelia put her hand on Lelich's. You couldn't go through with it. What? I reviewed the tapes myself. You were unstoppable, Lelich. Suzaku was already down for the count and you had Nunnally in your web. She called out for you. She wanted you, more than anyone else, to protect her. I was. Lelich was shocked. With Suzaku down and me halfway across the planet, she knew neither of us could help her. When it comes down to it, her first instinct is always to lean on you. You've taken such good care of her. She misses you. She still cries every now and then because you're no longer around, sometimes to sleep. I do my best to support her, but you left a huge hole in her heart, Lelich. Even though she knows she can see you again, she still wishes you could be around every day. She loves you, purely and innocently. You're her big brother, you beat back the things that make her afraid. She's almost dependent on you. Nunnally. The sound of wobbling pottery alerted both Lelich and Cornelia. Nunnally, you don't have to eavesdrop. You can sit in on the conversation. Nunnally maneuvered her wheelchair into the room. I wasn't eavesdropping, not the whole way through anyway. I heard you talking about me and what happened with that monster and that was, actually you, big brother. Lelich sighed. I'll tell you everything, Nunnally. I'm sorry, I just never got around to it, Cornelia said to Lelich. It's quite all right. I can tell her what's been going on with me for so long. 2 hours later. I see, I'm glad you told me. I'm sorry for lying to you for so long. It's all right. I knew a lot of it already. Cornelia told me a little bit, just not all of what you've been through here in the Soul Society. I never meant to hurt you, Lelich said in anguish. Nunnally moved over to him and caressed his hand. I know you never would. I love you, big brother, because you've always done your best for me. Nunnally, Lelich smiled at her. Lelich, why don't you take the day with just your sister? What? But what about? Lelich, I'm a trained military professional. Trust me, I can take up some of your slack work. Thank you, Cornelia. Hey, what's family for? Group hug. Nunnally chimed. What? Lelich said flatly, only for him to be sandwiched between his sisters. Lelich put one arm around either of them, smiling in content. Rather than wheel around Nunnally in her wheelchair, Lelich instead decided to carry Nunnally over his back like he used to. Considering how great of shape he was in, he could support her weight no problem. He had a direction he wanted to go in. If Nunnally's eyesight wasn't psychosomatic, then maybe the same procedure could be done to give his sister her legs back. It was worth a shot, hence why he was going to Division 12. However, he took the scenic route, letting his sister lean over his shoulder to arms looped loosely around his neck, smiling next to his ear as he carried her all through his home for the last near century and a half. This place is so amazing, Lelich. When I die, will I get to live here? It's way too early for you to be thinking of such things, Nunnally, but yes, you will live here. You're my sister and I'll take good care of you like I always have. Oh, how cute. Lelich heard the outcry and turned to his left to see Isane with a bag of medical equipment she appeared to be bringing towards her division. Lelich-kun, is that your sister? Yes, Lelich nodded. Nunnally, this is Katetsu Isane. Isane, this is my little sister Nunnally, the Empress of Britannia. Oh, Isane said, taken by surprise, and bowed. Good day to you, Empress. You don't have to bow. If you're a friend of my big brother, then that makes us friends too. Isane smiled. Lelich-kun, how did you get so lucky to be given such an adorable little sister? Luck of the draw. Lelich asked with a goofy grin, taking a stab in the dark. What do you do around here, Miss Isane? Nunnally asked. Isane gave a shallow bow. I'm the Fukotaiko of the 4th Division. The 4th Division is the medical department. I heal people. She's no slouch in combat either, Lelich told Nunnally. As I told you, every Soul Reaper is outfitted with a weapon called a Zanpakuto. To be a vice captain, you need to have its Shikai fully mastered to be considered qualified for the position, though there are rare exceptions. Are you showing your sister the Siriti? Isane asked. Well, my mother and sister already did that yesterday. I was going to introduce her to everyone and spend some time with her. Also, I was hoping to cure her legs. Why not just come by the division? I'm sure Hinamari Teiko and I could try something. Are you sure? Isane smiled. Anything's worth a shot. I'd be more than happy to try. I might be able to walk again. Nunnally asked. Lelich nodded with a smile. Yes. It won't hurt, will it? And no, of course not. We're not putting you in surgery, Isane told her. They'll use that special Kaido thing I told you about, Lelich said to Nunnally. It'll be like putting your skin under a warm light bulb or by a heater. He looked at Isane. I don't know if you really can cure her legs, but I'm very grateful that you are willing to try. What are Nakama for? Isane asked with a smile. Lelich just smiled back. 4th Division. With Momo busy making preparations for the battle, responsibility fell completely on Isane. First, she gave Nunnally an X-ray to determine which parts of her legs and spinal column were actually afflicted. Even though the trauma wasn't physical because it was caused by Charles's geese, the impulses sent to muscle control still were shut off like an actual paraplegic. Lelich was asked to just wait patiently. Isane spent a good several minutes examining Nunnally's X-ray. Since the legs were not broken naturally, she wanted to make sure a simple Kaido procedure would work. From examining the X-ray, Isane found she'd have to be nice and precise with her Kaido in order to cure Nunnally, else she could run the risk of giving her Kaido fever, an affliction caused by overloading a healthy body with healing Kido. However, this was nothing Isane felt she couldn't handle. She was a vice captain, this was almost child's play to her. She had Nunnally lay flat on her stomach on cold table while Isane carefully outstretched the crippled girl's legs. She started with Nunnally's spinal column, counting vertebrae up from her tailbone. With a single, gloved finger pressed firmly into Nunnally's skin, right over the bone, Isane controlled her Ryotsu properly to send out small waves of Kaido to heal Nunnally's injury. "That feels good," Nunnally said. The sensation was very much like the gentle sensation of her back being stroked like she was a domestic cat. "Please stay still," Isane told her. "This next part is very important." Nunnally did her best to obey, staying perfectly still. Isane draped Nunnally's gown back over her back, now moving to the girl's legs. She started with Nunnally's hamstrings and the back inside of her kneecaps. She only emitted small waves along the muscle and then placed her palm upon Nunnally's glutes in order to establish a flowing connection to her legs. She then moved down along towards Nunnally's lower legs. Her ankle, her heel, and the ball of her foot, one right after the other, Isane cautiously emitted Kaido into the young Empress body. After waiting a little while, doing her best to flow the Ryotsu by moving her hands back and forth over Nunnally's legs, directing her own Ryotsu in Nunnally's body, she then stood behind the young Empress and clamped hold of her legs gently and emitted more Kaido in a final jolt to revitalize them. It sent a shiver up Nunnally's spine to her brain and it made her pulse quicken, but it was a sensation like reacting to a jump scare. "Well, if it worked, that should be it," Isane told Nunnally. "Try wiggling your toes." "But my legs still feel numb," Nunnally stated. "That's normal, but that'll wear off," Isane told her. "Come on, Nunnally. I know you can do it," Isane encouraged. At first nothing happened, but then after a bit of effort her toe twitched. "Lelich-kun!" Isane exclaimed. "What? What happened?" Lelich burst into the room fearing the worst, but when he saw Nunnally's toes moving all he could do was just stare. "Nunnally, your legs are working." "Isane, a mirror, please." Isane brought Lelich a hand mirror that he held in front of Nunnally's foot at an angle that by turning her head she could see it. She was smiling. There was a tear in her eye. "I'll be able to walk again. Isane, words cannot express my gratitude." Lelich gave the vice captain a friendly peck on the cheek. Isane turned bright red. "It was my pleasure," Isane stuttered. While she had slept with Lelich before, now that he was married she certainly hadn't expected that kind of gratitude. She still needs to take it easy. It'll be a few hours before she can put weight on her leg. You'll have to carry her around for a little while longer. Lelich sat over by the table and gave his back for Nunnally to grab a hold of as he hoisted her onto his back again. "Then I guess I'll go see Byakuya, Hisuna, and the twins. It's been a while since I've seen Kyo and Isao. Give my best to them all." Lelich smiled. Of course, his smile faded and turned into one of serious gratitude, and thanks, again. "You can't understand how much this means to us." Isane blushed. "I can estimate." Lelich smiled and then proceeded to leave the area. Western Rokanga. Again. Hwaya! With a fierce, roaring cry, Colin brought her fist and slammed it into Tatsuki's palm. Because of her superior Ryotsu, Tatsuki received no injury and Colin felt like she had just punched raw steel. It had been like this for hours. "Come on!" Colin shouted as she went limp in the arms, hunched over panting. "All I've been doing is tiring my body out while you do that healing flame nonsense to get me right back on my feet. When do I actually begin to develop something?" "Quiet. I have to be rigorous. We've only got a few days and both of us need to be on the front lines. Every time I use Iyashino-en, I'm essentially supplanting my own Ryotsu into your body. Haven't you noticed you've been able to strike easier and more often before you collapse? I'm not even using my transformed states. You're still not strong enough or stable enough to actually handle a proper full bring. If you want in on that battlefield, you have to be able to get to a certain level, and right now you are not even close. You should have known what you signed up for. I told you that you didn't belong here. This isn't just something you just jump into. You're lucky you have the advantage that I can heal you in seconds. I didn't have that. So let's keep going. You need to build proper stamina. You're getting there, but you need more. Now come on, do it again. With another fierce yell, Colin charged. Kukaki manner. Nunnally's legs were still a little sensitive, so Hisuna was nice enough to set up a blanket outside for her to sit on, legs curled underneath her while Nunnally talked to her children. Meanwhile, she and Lelich sat on the porch while they watched the trio eat and have fun. Hisuna sat on her knees and sipped her tea regally. You know this happy moment is all you're doing, right? What do you mean? If you hadn't found Rukia when you did, I would have contracted that virus that was going around in Inzuri. If that happened, Byakuya-sama and I would have never had children. Hisuna smiled at Lelich. I can go on living thanks to you. I just got lucky, Lelich said, being modest. If you had told Byakuya Taeko and I from the start what was going on, we would have helped you. Yes, I understand that now, Hisuna said as she watched a petal fall from the tree and land on Kyo's nose. She sneezed. It was adorable. Kyo, cover your mouth. Hisuna called. Sorry, Kaa-sama. Kyo called back amiably. You're a really good mother, Lelich told Hisuna. Thank you, Hisuna laughed, taking the compliment. Anyway, as we were saying, I really have enjoyed these last 75 years. I never thought when I first laid eyes upon him that we'd be like this. He's a good man, Kukaki Byakuya. You chose well. Lelich smiled. And he's lucky to have you. You two are a perfect match. Oh, stop it, you're going to make me blush, Hisuna said with a bit of nervous laughter. We're married to different people. You shouldn't say things like that. I'm only saying it to affirm how joyous and mirthful your family is, Lelich said, staring at Nunnally. I've never really known what it's like to be part of a loving family. My childhood vanished when I was really young. Yes, so you've let us all know. But, Lelich, you'll get to know what this feeling is like soon enough. Susanna and Shirley have to get pregnant eventually as long as you're trying. I know, Lelich said with a depressing tone. You'll make as good a dad, if not better, than Byakuya-sama. I'll say this though, it's no picnic being a parent. I thought I was ready when it happened, but it's pretty much chaos and you'll be met with a lot of resistance. So as a friendly warning, let me tell you this, more than Aizen, your child will be the biggest obstacle you've ever had to face. Hisuna was smirking, so Lelich knew she meant that to tease him of how much the little toddler would drive him to pure insanity. Just because you've raised Nunnally and just because you've helped us by babysitting the twins when we absolutely needed it doesn't mean all children are as good-natured as them. Look at Kiyaki. He's a bit of a stubborn mule and constantly giving Shisato a hard time. He needs to stay away from Yachiro, she's a bad influence on him, Lelich said, mostly in jest. I'm glad you came by. It's rare I get to have a heart-to-heart talk with just a friend. Sometimes you need to speak to people more than just the person you're married to. I think I understand what you mean, Lelich said and then stood up. I'm going to take Nunnally with me to meet Yuna and Nimue. Give my regards to your husband, would you? Of course, Hisuna smiled. Division 13. Considering Jinjo's connections to the division, Yukate's grounds were where Kigo and Ririka had been resting their heads for the past couple of days. Currently they'd both just come out of the bath and were lounging about the room he'd given them in their robes, sitting in front of the foot of the bed on the floor. Kigo was showing Ririka more of his concert photos and videos off of his computer, which he brought with him. She was lying against him watching Kigo jam out like a rock star on the video he was playing. When the video was over, Kigo put his computer on sleep mode and wrapped his arms around his girl. Remember your promise. Ririka tilted her head back so that she was looking at the side of Kigo's head. As long as you keep yours. I won't betray your heart. Then I'll stay with you. They kissed and Kigo grabbed her breast with his hand. Ah. Hey. I didn't say you could advance yet. Kigo removed his hand like he touched hot iron. Ryrika covered her chest. Pervert, she muttered under her breath. Ryrika, what exactly are you holding out for? Are you afraid that's all I want from you? Ryrika was silent for a moment before she answered with an honest, saddened, yes. I like you, I really do, but could you be faithful to me? You were the type of person that stared at everyone. You even tried to peek on Jackie that one time. I was a kid back then. Ryrika, I'm a rock star. I have more fangirls than I know what to do with. But, none of them are you. I don't get it, what's so special about me? You're the only girl who ever saw me for what I was, and even though you always chewed me out, you never chased me away either or beat me up. You're just an idiot. I yelled at you because I thought so lowly of you, just like your sister. Kigo sighed. Please don't bring her up. You got my point at least. Ryrika, I'm trying to be sentimental here and I know I'm failing. I'm not a romantic like Ichigo, or a sharp dresser like Lelouch, and I'm certainly not a smooth operator like Lelouch, but I still have feelings for you that I've never harbored for any other girl. You want me because I'm difficult. Do you see me chasing after Arisawa at all? Kigo joked. Even before I met you, I never really felt like I was anything other than a skirt chaser, but you're someone that taught me what it means to have an emotional connection to someone. I care about you not as a girl, but as a human being. You're my friend. You have been since Jinjo let me into Skyushin. Now Ryrika was the one feeling like the villain. Kigo, do you absolutely promise that you'll always cherish me? Isn't that what I've been saying? But what if I suck? There are ways around that. I will make this work, Ryrika. The magenta-haired woman tightened her legs up by her chest as she became increasingly nervous. You better keep your promise. If you break my heart, I'll disappear and you will never find me again. I'm really bad at this love thing. Ryrika recalled the one time she trapped a boy with her old Fullbring and forced him to be like her pet and how she eventually let him go. She was afraid that either Kigo would leave her or, even without her old Fullbring, she'd use her assassin skills to force him to stay. You think I'm any better? Kigo asked. Ryrika cracked a smile. I'm just letting you know. She went over to the window and closed the blinds. She also locked the door. She straddled Kigo and put her hands on his shoulders. Make me a real woman. Is it your first time? Ryrika nodded with a worried look. Mine too, but I read a lot about this stuff, just leave everything to me. Kigo soon had Ryrika flat on her back and there was soon hot, steamy sex going on in their room. Kigo had Ryrika crying out like a songbird. It was beautiful. It was romantic. It was love. Sokioka Hill. After meeting with Yuna in her office, who was enthralled to meet Nunnally, considering her to be the cutest thing she'd ever seen, Nunnally's legs were finally starting to settle down and, with Lelouch guiding her by the hand, since it had been so many years since she ever took steps on her own 2 feet, so that she didn't stumble and also because despite having her legs and eyes back, her constitution was another matter entirely. Eventually he managed to bring his sister to Sokioka Hill, just in time for the sunset. Wow! Nunnally exclaimed when she saw the colorful horizon. It's so pretty. I wanted to be able to show you such an amazing sight, now that you can see again. Thank you, big brother, Nunnally said, giving Lelouch a big hug. After a few moments of staring at the horizon, Lelouch and Nunnally sat down on the hill together, with Lelouch's arm wrapped around his sister. Excuse me while I throw up before you give me diabetes. You know you really know how to kill an atmosphere. Lelouch, this is one step away from turning into an incestuous scene with you and your sister. You have the sunset, sweet atmosphere, and you've spent all day with her. Go away. Oh, I intend to. I am not getting caught up in this. But yes, heaven forbid I try to stop you from having sex with your sister, she added sarcastically and then dived deep into the recesses of Lelouch's inner world. Big brother, why does Mr. Aizen need to fight? Because he's an evil man, Nunnally, it was the simplest explanation he could give. People like him don't need a reason to make others miserable. No, there's always a reason even if it's not a very good one. People considered you evil, but you had your reasons too. Even if he has his reasons, there's no reasoning with him. Aizen's made his choices already. Rita told us Kazumi's tragic history. I will spare you the details. She was someone who had reason to fight. Aizen doesn't. I've known that man for too long. I've thought about it for a while, and all of this is my fault. What? No, that can't be true. I killed Aizen. I put Talbumasuk in power. Talbumasuk falls in love with Mia. They are defeated. They have Kazumi who goes back in time. If I had never killed Aizen, even though I had to, none of this would have happened. Lelouch sunk his head. No matter what I do, I just cause trouble. People follow me, but the biggest issues are always caused by my hand. I set the chain reaction off that caused Zero Requiem. I killed Euphemia. I killed Shirley. It's all me. Lelouch. Only Nunnally was allowed to see Lelouch this upset. He didn't even want Susanna or Shirley to see him like this. They put him on such a pedestal that he almost felt obligated to keep that illusionary pedestal from being broken. They couldn't see him like this, not for these reasons. They'd tell him it wasn't his fault, but right now he needed someone who could just let him vent, listen, and soothe him. And Nunnally did. She put her arms around Lelouch. Big Brother's trying really hard. All he has to do is do this and everything will be fine. Yeah, Lelouch said, coming around sniffing. This is it, right? The last hurrah. And then things will be okay again. Miss Rita will make sure Aizen is punished properly, won't she? Yeah, Lelouch wiped his eyes. Rita will punish Aizen. And I'll continue to set it up so that Kazumi can have a proper resolution as well. This thought process then led Lelouch to say, Nunnally, I'm sorry we have to be separated like we are. I told you before, if I could do it all over again, I'd want to be with you. Lelouch. Lelouch pulled Nunnally in as tight as he could. I love you, Nunnally. Big Brother. Nunnally crawled around to get in between Lelouch's legs as he held her to his body as though she were a body pillow, cradling her like a pet. Nunnally was the one person he treasured more than anything else in the known universe. Even more than his own wives, Nunnally held a special place in his heart that no one could take away from him or should even dare to. Lelouch stroked her hair. You used to be the only thing that mattered to me, and now even though I have so much more, you're still all that I want. I worry sometimes when I don't know if you're safe or not these days. Everyone always thinks I'm so strong, but when it comes right down to it, I'm weak. The only reason I can be so strong is because others place me on a pedestal as some sort of demigod or amazing master of justice, when all I am is human. Nunnally, I will always love you no matter what. Even if by the time you come to Soul Society for real I'm no longer around, I will always love you, always. Nunnally snuggled closer into her brother's embrace. Lelouch, can we spend the day again together tomorrow too? Of course. We can spend all day tomorrow and the next day just you and me, Lelouch said with a smile, keeping his tears at bay. Before you have to go back to Britannia, I promise that we can spend as much time as we can together. Nunnally squeezed Lelouch a little harder. Thank you, Big Brother. You're welcome, Nunnally. There was a pause before he then said. Lelouch, you know how Cornelia said that I called for you when I was in trouble when you were a hollow. What about it? Well, I called for you because she was right. You're the first person I want to protect me because Big Brother has taken care of me since I was small. You've loved me since before I learned how to walk and long after I lost that ability again. Big Brother is my hero. Nunnally exclaimed as she clung to Lelouch. That's why I love Big Brother with all my heart and soul, and why you're the best Big Brother ever, Lelouch. You're my hero, Nunnally sniffed, my favorite hero. Thank you, Nunnally, Lelouch told her as he rubbed her shoulder with his hand, that means a lot to me. And I'm sorry that these next 2 days might be our last. Your hero might have to disappear again. And if that happens, I hope you can forgive your favorite Big Brother once again. To be continued. Chapter 202, Lelouch vs Aizen, Point of No Return. 48 hours later. Alright, Tatsuki said as she healed Colin for the umpteenth time, you're ready. Show me what you've learned. Prove to me you belong on that battlefield. Okay. Colin said and stood still before assuming the initial stance she had originally taken when she collapsed before Jin found her. She tensed her body as a starburst of red formed around her and her hair blew up from the updraft. She maintained her focus, kept her rigid stance and then declared loudly, "Black Queen." Instantly the red energy turned jet black and converged on Colin's pilot suit, which then became coated in a sleek, jet black armor with spikes adorned around her in a pattern that made her suit out to be like she was coated by the skin of a black, metal reptilian creature. Considering her powers came from Tatsuki's riot, so they manifested similarly to hers, though not being the same. Colin's power source was her pilot suit. She'd had it since she piloted the Gurren Mk2 and red had always been her color even when she was still piloting that low-rate Glasgow. Nice riot suit, very good. I suspect you might be about here, Kataki no Ryu. Tatsuki assumed her initial transformation level where all she did was emit her fiery wings, claws and tail. Now, Tatsuki bade Colin forward, "Come on." Colin rushed forward and struck forward at Tatsuki's face. The martial arts expert blocked Colin's fist with her left hand, twisted Colin's arm out of the way and kneed her beneath her bust line before head-butting Colin and sending her reeling back. Tatsuki rushed forward at a withheld speed to give Colin time to react. Colin put up her arm as a slot on the palm slid aside and revealed a glowing orange sphere as a fierce pressure wave of heat emitted and pushed Tatsuki back. Colin, using Bringer Light, took a huge step back and closed the slot in her fist before rushing forward and leaping high into the air and attempted to come slamming down from above with an outstretched arm. Tatsuki jumped back to dodge, but as she landed Colin opened her left palm and another slot opened. As she hit the ground a large pillar of radioactive energy erupted all around her, destroying everything around her within her personal space stretching about twice her height and sinking half of it. A small, unstable stalk of ground was left where Colin was still standing. She leapt off it as she disintegrated and rushed at Tatsuki again. She sidestepped the woman's fiery fist and kicked into Tatsuki's stomach sending Tatsuki flying, but with her wings, Tatsuki steadied herself in the air. Keshitsudama. The ball of flame went barreling towards Colin, but she knew how to counter. She opened her palm again and let out the radioactive energy as the large ball of fire came towards her. She slowed it down and attached it to her fist, like a magnet. She then sucked in the energy straight into the open slot in her arm. Girl's got some nice moves. Colin's right arm slot closed as her left arm slot opened and she extended her arm upward. Radiation pulse. A thin laser of radioactive energy went sailing towards Tatsuki and she barely managed to dodge out of the way as the blast went sailing into the far reaches of the upper atmosphere. Not bad for a newcomer, Tatsuki remarked to herself. She took a stance as she faced back at Colin as she imbued her arms with flame and dove towards the new Fullbringer. As she neared Colin she stopped immediately and extended her arms out, letting out all of the fire in a continuous stream. Koton Nan. Colin countered with her radiation wave, but was unable to absorb the energy coming out of Tatsuki. She was, however, able to pull it apart and nullify it. Tatsuki dropped to the ground and let out a breath as she returned to base form. "All right, not bad, Colin. You're probably at a strong enough level to handle close to a base vice captain." "What? That's it. That's as good as I am." Colin was disappointed. She wanted to become strong enough to protect Lelich, to be his bodyguard again. "Colin, we're out of time," Tatsuki told her sternly. "There's no more time I have left to teach you. Tomorrow morning is the battle. This will have to do. But Lelich will be fine." Tatsuki exasperated to her. "He's had nearly a century and a half of training. Don't think that you can reach his level just by pushing yourself to your very limits and expect to be at his level. Fullbring by its very nature does let you start out at a higher level than an academy student. In fact, basic Fullbring could put you anywhere between 10th and 5th seat starting out depending on the spiritual pressure you have accumulated prior to acquiring it. You're lucky you made it as far as you did in just a few days." Tatsuki scratched her head. "I imagine that has something to do with the fact that you obtained a proportional percentage of my spiritual power to reach this level with the amount of times I healed you, and also because the Soul Society is abundant with every free-flowing Reishi. Without that, you would have never reached the level you are currently at. If we had more time it's possible you could have reached my next level transformation, but that's all you could have done without years upon years of training. In time, if you push yourself, you might have the stamina and skill to come close to reaching captain level or even my level, since my final form has me much stronger than the average sealed blade captain, but you can't expect to just jump into things and master it immediately. Tatsuki looked down at Colin like a teacher scolding their student, arms folded. When you piloted the Gurren, was that the first time you had piloted a nightmare frame? Of course not. You'd spent a short while piloting one already, and I'm sure you'd familiarized yourself with how one worked first too. You have to crawl before you can walk and walk before you can run. Simple logic. Colin looked disheartened. Hey, Tatsuki said, putting a hand on her shoulder, you did well. No one's going to think less of you for not getting to where you need to be. You did good, Colin. Lelich will be proud of you for getting at least this far. Colin smiled. Tatsuki stretched her arms up over her head and reached behind her back with one arm and grabbed that arm's elbow with the other. So, let's say we call it a night, yeah? Big day tomorrow. Before we do that, Colin said, now that I can sense Ryotsu and feel it. Can you show me just how strong you really are? When you fought alongside me, you were much stronger than you are now, right? Tatsuki put her arms down and smirked. Yeah, that's true. In fact, the form I used against you wasn't nearly as strong as it is now. My Ryotsu in it is still superior to yours. When I first had that form, I used it to defeat low-level Arrancar. I held back using its full strength. I would have clobbered you otherwise. However, I needed it to use some of my stronger techniques I can't use without activating it. I just didn't put my all into them. You would have been roasted otherwise. So show me. Show me your full power. I want to know just how strong you really are. I want to feel the difference between my power and the levels above me so that I have something to shoot for in the future. Well, alright, but if you find yourself struggling to breathe, I'm going to stop. This is the full power of my initial form. Tatsuki went into Kataki no Ryu's basic form and radiated out her Ryotsu to let Colin feel it. Colin felt the pressure, but it did little more than made her wince. The fact that you can withstand my Ryotsu shows that your endurance is pretty high, even though the full power of this form could crush you if I actually hit you full force. When I first obtained this form of my power, it had a dark side to it. My Ryotsu was given to me directly from a captain-level Soul Reaper, my sensei Fong Shaolin, so my full bring developed like that of a Soul Reaper's. I had another presence inside me and it fought to control my body. Eventually it got out, but then, Tatsuki charged her Ryotsu as flecks of ash began to appear around her body and she now had a skin-tight gray suit covering her body. I learned how to control my power and put that inner spirit in its place. I became more powerful and suppressed her within me, which is how I obtained this form, Kataki no Ryu, Kaijin Hata. Like this I was more powerful than ever before. I thought I had mastered my power, but I was wrong, dead wrong. Colin could feel Tatsuki's current Ryotsu. It was ridiculously high compared to hers. The energy that Tatsuki was emitting was more than 3 times that of when she first obtained the form. Like this, Tatsuki could defeat a mildly experienced captain using Shikai with relative ease. See, Tatsuki continued, there was this Zanpakuto called Muramasa and he freed the spirit within my body. She took all of my power with her and she tried to fight the demon within Ichigo. She lost, badly. She freed herself because she thought I rejected her or hated her, but I never hated her. She was a part of me. If I hated her it would be like hating myself. So, Tatsuki's Ryotsu climbed even higher as her wings turned leathery and her tail did the same thing. She gave what power she was holding from me, to me, and allowed me to obtain my most powerful form, Saigo no Kataki no Ryu. Colin now saw Tatsuki in the form she'd seen her when they'd fought together. Tatsuki's Ryotsu was immeasurable by the low-level Foolbringer's standards. She couldn't even fathom how Tatsuki could even be this strong. Colin was doing her best not to suffocate under the weight of Tatsuki's spiritual pressure. Like this, Tatsuki said, I am the most powerful Fullbringer that ever lived. According to Ichigo I had a limiter on me when we fought Britannia. It has since been removed. When I first got this form, I was only as strong as the average Bankai using captain. I trained to better myself and become superior to Ichigo's ability when he was in Bankai since he was always better than me, but that was Ichigo 20 years ago, at full power with me only 1/5 my full power. As I am now, I am 5 times as strong as the old Ichigo. It is a feat considered impossible by a Fullbringer, but I managed to obtain it, because my Ryotsu came from a Soul Reaper. Tatsuki stopped emitting her Ryotsu, allowing Colin to breathe normally. Watch carefully, Tatsuki said and took flight. She extended her arm and took aim at an empty plot of land 10 acres wide. Using only a percentage of her maximum Ryotsu to create an attack, she released a baseball-sized ball of flame that then went rocketing towards the ground and erupted the entire acre into an inferno that climbed several stories into the air. Whoa, Colin uttered as Tatsuki lowered to the ground. Tatsuki leaned back and relaxed her body as she returned to normal. That, she said, wasn't anywhere close to being my maximum. That was, Tatsuki scratched her head, 5–10% of what that attack is capable of. I just don't have the large enough area to show you. What? Colin shouted. Tatsuki folded her arms, pretty impressive, eh? That's more than impressive. That's insanity. That's spiritual power, Tatsuki remarked. Now, what say we go get some sleep? Lamperouge House. Meals had been concluded at the Lamperouge household. Susanna was staying late at the division. Yuna wanted no leftover work to come back to since tomorrow would certainly be grueling on everyone, and the lack of work for tomorrow morning before the start of departure would make for a relief of stress. With that said, nothing could help Lelich's stress. He was worrying about tomorrow. Who would live and who would die? Plans had already been distributed to the proper folk and it would be absolute chaos to ensure victory. Lelich was rather unhappy about what he heard about what Aizen was capable of. With the powers he had stolen from Kazumi and the way the artificial dimension worked, Aizen could call upon indescribable powerful abominations and demons the likes of which the Soul Society had probably never faced or could fathom. Lelich was confident about the plan he had set up with the others, but would it be enough? In theory, taking down Aizen should be possible with who he had selected to fight him, but fate just had that way of fucking Lelich up the ass when he least suspected it. The captain of Squad 10 was currently in the study. He was writing something out on his desk with a manila envelope sitting on the table next to it on his right side and several other pages of blank stationery fully used, both sides, on his left. With the moon out, only the desk lamp provided him any sort of light. To my esteemed student and friend Momo, he spoke as he continued to write the letter, I. There was a knock on the door that interrupted him from his thoughts. Come in, Lelich said, continuing to write in silence. Lulu, Shirley called his name as she stepped in. Lelich let out a deflated breath as he leaned back in his chair. Finished your night class? He asked. Shirley nodded. Is everything all right? That's my line. How come you aren't in bed? I know Susanna said she'd be staying late, but... Lelich took a deep breath. I can't lie to her about the truth of what I'm doing right now, but, if she the real reason why I was doing it. Lelich breathed again. I'm writing a last will and testament. What? Why? Shirley exclaimed fearfully. Surely, tomorrow will be the most difficult battle of my life yet. I am just as mortal as anyone else on that battlefield tomorrow. If I die, there will be no one to carry on the legacy of Zero without my word to say who it should be. I have to pass on my legacy some way, somehow, on the off chance that I don't make it. Don't say things like that. You'll make it. You'll. Life is always filled with uncertainties, and my life has always intended to make me miserable when I really need things to come through. I can't take the risk. I plan for every eventuality, even the worst case scenario. Lulu, are you afraid of fighting tomorrow? No, I'm not afraid to fight, nor am I afraid to die, Lelich said with a tired tone, but I am afraid to leave you behind, crying, both you, and Susanna. Shirley walked over to Lelich and hugged him from behind. Lulu, if you're that afraid, should we cherish tonight? What do you mean? I mean, tonight, if you're that afraid of losing your legacy, of leaving us behind, let's let tonight be the best night you've ever had. That's the least I can do, Lulu, since I'm not strong enough to go with you tomorrow. Okay, Lelich agreed. He figured he could finish his will in the morning. He went to his room with Shirley and the two immediately got busy with Lelich, making her cry out like a songbird as he masterfully made love to her. Lulu, it's too much, Shirley gasped, face redder than a slice of pepperoni, you're making me come. Oh God, I'm gonna come. Ah. Shirley climaxed as she sat on Lelich's lap, arms wrapped around him. She threw her head back, letting her body fall back onto the bed. While they were in the middle of missionary, Susanna happened to walk into the bedroom. Lelich paused. Susanna folded her arms. What? Couldn't wait for me? It's not like I wasn't coming back tonight, she said with a sly smile. Both Lelich and Shirley replied with a nervous smile and laughter. Susanna joined in by sitting on top of Shirley's face, allowing the redhead to lick her from below while the silver-haired woman made lip-to-lip contact with Lelich. Positions were swapped and rotated several times, and eventually Lelich had to make a choice whose body he'd release into. The slowing of his pace as he stroked himself while Susanna and Shirley were busy tonguing and scissoring each other caught the attention of the two women. Lulu, what's the matter? Shirley asked. I think I know, Susanna said, staring as sexual activity ceased on everyone's account. Give it to Shirley, she told Lelich. What? Lelich was surprised to hear her say that. You and I are both going tomorrow. You have the best chance of producing an offspring if you seed her, Susanna calculated. Worst case scenario, she said punctually. Lelich realized she was right. No matter how much I want a baby, right now we need to ensure your legacy. I saw the will. I know you're worried. Shirley, she looked at the redhead. It was my idea in the first place, Shirley said. She extended her arm to Lelich. Come here, Lulu. Give me your baby. Lelich stepped towards Shirley and straddled over her before plunging back inside her. Susanna fingered herself, watching the two of them until all three of them climaxed one right after the other, starting with Shirley and ending with Susanna. Now we have a full normal change, minus the lower fertility rates in the Soul Society of you becoming a father, Susanna said as she sprawled out on her back and Lelich withdrew from Shirley and turned over on his back. Yeah, Lelich exhaled, exhausted. You two up for another round in a little bit? Shirley asked. We should make this night special since we don't know what tomorrow might bring. I never thought I'd hear that coming from you, Shirley, Lelich teased as he reached up and tickled her stomach. Stop it, Shirley laughed, responding to his touch. I'm good, if you two are, Susanna said, sitting up. Lelich Dono. I'm good, Lelich said, just give me a bit. It took a little bit longer than expected for Lelich to stiffen up again, but eventually round 2 was underway. Since this could very well be his last night with his wives, Lelich wanted to try new things, so Susanna was surprised when he inserted himself into her back door while he had her bent forward on her hands and knees. Ah. Lelich Dono, that hurts. It'll settle in a second, he told her as he went in and out. Oh, Susanna shuddered, this feels so strange. Shirley positioned herself underneath Susanna and began fondling her chest while the two exchanged saliva. Shirley then went over by Lelich and straddled his arm with her breasts as she fingered Susanna's other hole. Whoa, Susanna, you're oozing like a fountain. It feels so good, Susanna moaned loudly. Why? It's a new experience, Lelich said as he continued to thrust. It feels strange to you and it's riddling you with a tingling sensation that you just can't explain. I always wanted to try this, but I would always change my mind, but as long as we don't know what tomorrow brings, I have no reason not to try. I'm going lightheaded. Go faster, Susanna moaned. Lelich picked up speed. Susanna leaned forward into the mattress, gripping the sheets. Oh my God. I'm going to come. I'm going to come with you, doing me in the ass. Lelich Dono. Lelich felt up Shirley with one hand while he continued to go at Susanna from behind. He managed to get Shirley to climax before orgasming to Susanna without withdrawing from her. She orgasmed hard. Oh God, it's going inside me. I feel so naughty, Susanna groaned with pleasure as she fell forward after Lelich withdrew from her and reflexively letting out a second spurt onto her back. After that, Susanna, Lelich and Shirley climbed into bed with the two women snuggling close to their husband, arms wrapped tightly around him to reassure him that they wouldn't let him go anywhere. Lelich fell asleep on his back in their arms. The next day. 8 a.m. Early wake-up call was mandatory across the Seoul Society for those that were going to the invasion. Deployment was at 1 p.m. and last-minute preparations were underway. Breakfast was in the large catering hall in 1st Division reserved only for special occasions. Kiryo Hakaifyun had whipped up a huge feast for everyone. Contrary to her initial belief, she was going to battle, so she was eating her own food. She wouldn't be fighting Aizen, but she could still lay a smack down upon his lesser minions. The meal was buffet style, and while Susanna was up getting food, Lelich watched as Yuna entered the hall and spoke with her vice captain as she loaded up her plate before making her way towards Lelich. Surprisingly to him, she looked cross. She put her plate down and Lelich heard it clack on the table. She then stood right in front of him, arms folded. "Okay, what the hell are you up to?" "I'm not sure what you're referring to. Susanna just told me about the will. She said she's concerned." "What's going on? What aren't you telling me?" "I'm just worried about today." Bull. Shit. Yuna interrupted, holding out each vowel briefly. "I know you better than that. That's my shtick. You always plan to make sure you come out alive. You have 11 other Soul Reapers fully capable of protecting your hide, and you have it arranged to have Hinamari Teiko at your back for the operation. What the fuck is really going on? Better tell her." Lelich sighed, knowing Iin Tamashi was right. He gestured to the seat Yuna had put her plate down in front of. "Sit." Yuna sat down and stared at him, waiting for an explanation. He took a deep breath. "Colin told me about the people I'm responsible for as Zero. I have to atone for it. Slap. You hit me?" Lelich gasped as he covered his red mark as Yuna forked a piece of egg in front of her. Yuna swallowed her egg and looked at Lelich with her eyes closed. "Lelich, you are going to die eventually. Why do you think? No, why would you think it would be a good idea to die as soon as possible to release the people you devoured?" Lelich just stared. He didn't have an answer. "I thought so," Yuna said, forking her sausage link. She swallowed again and dabbed her face with her napkin. "Lelich, sometimes when you, personally, are depressed, you act without thinking. I watched you during your venture as Zero. You always act irrationally when you're upset." Yuna finally opened her eyes. "Lelich, if you even think about leaving the Soul Society behind for 50 fucking people, I will find you and drag you back to the Soul Society with my sword, put you in stasis until you're 18 again, reawaken your memories and pummel you for being an idiot. Do you know how many lives you've touched while you're here? What's more important to you, Lelich? The living? Or the dead?" Lelich just listened to Yuna's sharp tone as she chewed him out thoroughly. Yuna pointed her fork at Lelich. "If I ever hear you making such a stupid decision again, you'll get more than just a friendly slap. Do you understand me?" "Why yeah. Think next time." Yuna snapped and went back to eating. "Sidewalk or trash can?" "Excuse me? I'm asking where you want to be spat out because you just got chewed up like a piece of gum." Lelich just mentally growled as Iin Tamashi laughed and laughed. At the end of his meal, Lelich prepared to clear his place and put his Haori back on, but before he could leave, Yuna called out to him again. "Hey." Lelich looked down at her and she smiled at him. "See you on the battlefield." Lelich smiled. "Yeah, I'll be counting on you, Yuna." Yuna nodded vigorously and went back to eating. By 11 o'clock, Lelich was waiting around Sokioku Hill reviewing his corroborated plan and setting things up. The plan was thus: the Goti I-13 and related parties would invade Aizen's domain in 12 groups of 6. The objective of each group was simple: one predetermined member from each group was to get to Aizen at any cost, whether it was their choice to do so or not. No matter who else on the team made it to Aizen, that person absolutely had to make it to Aizen. The 11 people that would fight Aizen besides Lelich were thus: Ichigo, Rita, Kazumi, Yuna, Yoriyuki, Anohana, Kensei, Marianne, Talbumasuke, Kenpeke, and Stefan. Each person had a reason to be in on that fight. Ichigo was immune to Kyoka Suijutsu and had thoroughly decimated Aizen before. Rita and Kazumi were uncertain how strong the true potential of Ichigo's core form was, so it was obvious he needed to battle. Also, Ichigo was fast and one of the fastest fighters they had and one of the most durable. Lelouch was the all-around weakest fighter of the 12, but he had a trump card, Seishin no Kaimusho. He could turn Aizen's own spiritual power against him for a brief moment before Aizen broke out of it. Also, Lelouch was the smartest member of the team. Rita, of course, had to go. She was their strongest asset period next to Kazumi, but they needed her there since she also was the only one who could put Aizen away back to hell. Also, Rita had put in a request to the Soul King if she could please get her core form back to fight Aizen. He had yet to return her message. She also was currently not affected by Kyoka Suijutsu. Kazumi was going, obviously. She wanted revenge and she was the strongest they had. Plus, with her Bankai, she could absorb a lot of what Aizen could throw at them and throw it right back. She too was currently not affected by Kyoka Suijutsu either. Yuna's saving grace was her Saigo no Teiga Tensho. Lelouch and the others had figured there was no way that Aizen could know she had it. Also it had stood on par with Ichigo's strongest Getchuga attack. Yuna, otherwise, was comparatively as weak as Lelouch otherwise. She just had better stamina and slightly better Ryutsu and higher durability. It was a debate of whether or not to send Yoriyuki or Urahara after Aizen. Both were incredibly competent combatants, both had good team synergy with everyone else who would be fighting, but Lelouch ultimately figured that Urahara needed to be on reserve. Lelouch needed to plan for every eventuality and Urahara, he figured, needed to be on standby for backup plans. He was the only extreme planner who could bail them out if they really needed a contingency plan, and Urahara could only do that if he wasn't on the front lines fighting Aizen. Urahara admitted that, as good as he was, he could never match Yoriyuki's strength, stamina, or speed. She was one of the best captains the Soul Society had ever had, and she had only gotten more powerful in the last 100 years since her exile. Her extermination of Tsukishima and her handling of Turbo proved it. For Anohana, it was her duty as captain commander to see Aizen defeated. Furthermore, when Aizen still had the wool pulled over everyone's eyes, she had suspected something wrong with his corpse doll. Lelouch figured this meant she had slightly resisted Kyoka Suijutsu. He knew she was strong and he needed that strength and leadership out on the front lines. Besides, Anohana made it very clear that her fighting Aizen was non-negotiable. After hearing about from Kiryu what Kensei did to Chrysanthemum and her, picking him was a no-brainer. Kensei, when he heard about being chosen and why, resisted at first, but Lelouch asked if Kensei could still be relatively that strong even without losing control. Kensei said he could do his best, but that Lelouch and the others should take cover if he lost his sense of self. Lelouch understood and had planned accordingly. Bringing Marianne in was a tactical move more than a personal one, no matter how much Byakuya and Urahara speculated otherwise. Anohana and Talbumasuk both understood though, and majority vote got her in. Marianne was a brand new Royal Guard member. Although she had already fought Aizen, she was still not under the control of Kyoka Suijutsu. Also, since her Bankai let her make any sort of armor she could fathom, it made her unpredictable, which would give the team a bit of an edge against Aizen. Marianne was very good at analytics and she was a team player. Lelouch had argued that they didn't have to know what Marianne would do, they only had to trust that she knew it was the right thing to do, something that Talbumasuk acknowledged that trust was a concept Aizen could not comprehend. Talbumasuk didn't suspect he'd actually get a chance to combat Aizen. There was a long debate as to whether or not he would go or to allow Stark, Urahara, or Shunsui to go in his place. However, like with Marianne, Talbumasuk's Bankai had plenty of unpredictability. Just the time manipulation could help turn the tide in battle against Aizen. Also, even if Talbumasuk's time powers couldn't affect Aizen, he could still help speed up Lelouch and the others when it was appropriate. "You're putting a lot of blind faith in me, Lelouch," Talbumasuk remarked when Lelouch made his point to put Talbumasuk on the front line. "We're fighting a common enemy. The only one with a grudge around here is you," Lelouch had told him. Adding Kenpeiga was a no-brainer. Even if Yuna hadn't brought the battle against Ichigo to Lelouch's attention, Kenpeiga wanted to fight and he ignored pain. Lelouch figured Kenpeiga might actually get to Aizen first with the way he charged ahead like a madman. Lelouch figured and, again, Talbumasuk agreed that Aizen might actually pull Kenpeiga towards him to get rid of him first to try and instill despair by taking out a strong asset relatively quickly. Lelich however knew that Kenpeka could still keep Aizen busy for a while and therefore, if they weren't already too late, give the group time to rescue CC. Adding Stefan was for similar reasons. First of all, the man was cautious. It had been a huge debate of who to send in. The group went on for hours of whether it should be Stefan, Stark, or Shunsui to be the 12th person to fight Aizen. They ultimately settled upon the 2nd Division captain because they were easily able to formulate a team with him. He had the most practical Zanpakuto of all the Soul Reapers and he was easily the one Soul Reaper who was the best team player no matter what team he was on. Stefan was also cautious, serious, and didn't try to cut corners in a fight. He did his best to be precise, which, everyone could agree was something they needed more than the raw power Shunsui or Stark could provide. Also, the man held out for a long time by himself against more than 2,000 Togabito. If he arrived against Aizen early, the man had the stamina to hold his own, even if he didn't have the strength to damage the power-hungry god wannabe. After that it was debated about teams. Each team would consist of 6 people. Besides the person who would go on to fight Aizen, each team would have a specific person who would keep an eye on that person and make sure that they got to Aizen without using too much of their Ryutsu and / or in a timely manner. This second would watch the fighters back and keep them alive, potentially at the cost of their own. The other 4 members were each assigned for the purpose of team synergy if possible and to also stay behind and make sure the fighter and their second could march on forward. The second was only to drop off the side of the person they were with if there was absolutely no other option. Ichigo's team consisted of Rukia, Chad, Uryu, Tatsuki, and Kigo. Rukia was his second. Lelich's team was Momo, Hitsugaya, Nimue, Colin, and Suzaku. Momo was his second. Rita had Shudera as her second and the rest of her team consisted of Asho, Nimeya, Nelly's daughter Arietta and Kairanji. They had nowhere else to put Arietta when they were drafting teams and when they asked Rita and Nelly about it they both seemed fine with it and Rita was good with kids now, she claimed. Nelly also felt safe putting her youngest daughter in the hands of such stronger warriors and warned what would happen if Arietta did not return safely. Senna was Kazumi's second. The rest of the team consisted of Renji, Tison, Halibal, and Jin. Picking Kazumi's team was odd since she hadn't really melded with anyone other than Senna and Talbumasuk was adamant about Mia being his second. Tison was Senna's captain and Jin worked well with Tison. Renji and Halibal just wound up being the odd ones out, though Talbumasuk speculated that given Kazumi's history she and Halibal would get along and Halibal couldn't stand Mia at all. Susanna was Yuna's second much to her chagrin. She had wanted to be at Lelich's back, but Lelich made it clear that he needed Momo to be his second since Momo was to be his successor should something befall him. Also, he figured he was the only one who could keep Momo fighting to the end other than Hitsugaya. Susanna had then asked why he didn't then opt out the 4th Division captain of a second position, but Lelich told Susanna that if Momo was to finally put the past behind her that this was something she needed to do and he needed this from her. Also Yuna and Susanna had been working together for years. Lelich felt Susanna would be better watching Yuna's back than his. He also didn't need Aizen doing something crazy to use his feelings towards Susanna against him. The rest of Yuna's team was Hisuna, Byakuya, Rangiku and Kayan. Again, Rangiku had wanted to go with Lelich, but she had also served with Yuna during the women's captaincy of Division 10 and Lelich wanted to keep an eye on Nimue himself after what happened last time. Predictably it was So iPhone who was Yoryuki's second with the rest of the team consisting of Tessai, Urahara, and, surprisingly Ririka and Nozomi. Anohana had Vera as her second, showing her sign of trust yet again in the redhead. Shunsui, Yukatake, Isane, and Kian rounded out the rest of her team. Kensei, of course, had Mashiro as his second. Lisa and Halibal's Fraxion made up the rest of the team. When Cornelia heard she would be Marianne's second, her inner fangirl went nuts, throwing confetti everywhere and squeeing profusely. Cornelia made it clear that she would not let Marianne down no matter what. Since Cornelia and Rurikiyo had met, the noble blonde would be with Marianne's group, as would Kiryu since the woman knew Marianne well. Because May was bright and neon she also was on Marianne's group and Kyokaka rounded out the team on Lelich's orders, the captain knowing he could count on her to look after his mother. Again, Talbumasuk was adamant that Mia be his second. He could think of no one else better suited to fight by his side. Barring Halibal the rest of the formerly titled Espada were on his team. There was some brief debate that Lilynet counted as an individual, but when it came time to try and work out a strike force they had no choice but to count her as her own individual even if she did have to fuse with Star-K to activate their resurrection. Anyone who didn't figure Yachiro would be Kenpei's second probably needed their head examined. The rest of his team consisted of Shisato, Yumichika, and Neliel and Grimjo's other children. Talisandra did have a good sense of direction according to Neliel, and Fenrik he took after his dad quite a bit so he'd fit right in following Kenpei everywhere. The strategy team was just worried Yachiro would get them horribly lost until Talbumasuk pointed out that if Aizen willed it he could send them to him or away from him as he wanted, and eventually some teams might cross paths anyway, and if Kenpei continued to run around in circles they hoped the group would eventually figure that out. Stefan, of course, would have Kendra as his second. The two had been friends for decades. The rest of the senior officers, plus Ashido, made up the rest of his team. Lelich looked at his watch as high noon began to roll around. As he waited around, pacing back and forth, one by one, or in groups, his fellow invaders began to form up in their appropriate teams. Lelich was already a bit at ease when Kenpei's group wasn't the last to show up. "We would have been here faster," Yachiro complained, "but Talis wouldn't take my shortcut." "Neliel, I owe your daughter one," Lelich sighed in relaxation. When everyone was assembled, it was just about time for Talbumasuk and Urahara to open the gateway to the artificial dimension. As usual, Anohana expected Lelich to give a speech. 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 Naomi, Susanna, Rangiku, Mashiro, and Momo chanted. Lelich sighed with a smile on his face. Now he had to give one. He nodded to Urahara and Talbumasuk who began to get things ready. "My fellow Soul Reapers," Lelich began, "you who have come to our aid to assist us in this manner. On the other side of the portal we are now opening is a man whose greedy ambitions knows no limits. In the name of justice he has wrought upon the deaths of countless lives and ruined other lives as well, including the once proud Tremere family and even our beloved, late Yamamoto Shijikuni Genri Yusai. Aizen Sosuke stands alone against all of us. He believes that with pure strength that he can overcome anything." Lelich threw his arm out to one side, flapping his haori, "but we will show him he is wrong. In unity there is great strength. In trust there is great honor. In friendship there is great potency. No matter what we were before, no matter our origins or if the person next to you doesn't normally see eye to you, like this we are a collective idea split into 72 people. Soul Reapers, Fullbringers, Arrancar, Quincy, Vizard, Togabito, each brand of Ryotsu art is represented at this assembly." And Lelich stopped talking when he felt a trace of spiritual pressure as a 13th team formed upon Sokioka Hill. There stood a man with long, black hair and a mustache that was attached to his sideburns. He wore a black cloak over a white uniform. Behind him stood a feminine-looking man with long black hair and a spiked face mask along with a woman with dark brown hair arranged in pigtails, a man with blonde hair the same build as Yukatake, and also two men with short white hair wearing glasses. One of them had a mustache that only the black cloak-wearing man knew his name, and the other was Uriu's father, Ryakan. "I thought you said this wasn't your fight," Lelich said, glancing at the group. "My son told us what was going on. I convinced Wywak to change his mind." "Make no mistake, Lamperouge Lelich," Wywak said, stepping forward, "I am only doing this for Earth. If Aizen Sosuke is planning what I have heard then I believe my services can be offered." Lelich smirked. "Well, that's your choice." Lelich cleared his throat and continued his speech. "As I was saying, each Ryotsu art is represented at this assembly. Aizen wants to call himself a god, then let him. A god is only as strong as the people who believe in him and the people who fear him. I already stopped my father from trying to overthrow the same god that Aizen now seeks to replace. He will not succeed. We will all make sure of it. In Britannia we have a saying, all men are not created equal. Well, I have something to say to that. Equality is not everything. If Aizen wants to consider himself above us all, then we will stand together and show him that together we are equal to him. If he wants to stand upon the moon, we will stand upon the shoulders of our friends and neighbors and throw him off of it. I am Zero. I am the man who works miracles. And today I am a man who slays false gods." Urahara and Talbumasuk finished opening the gateway to Aizen's domain. Lelich turned around. My team. Assemble. Lelich's team was alongside him in an instant. Everyone. To arms. Let us show Aizen just exactly who it is that he's dealing with. The cries of war-hungry Soul Reapers in agreement let Lelich know that he had the backing of his allies and comrades. Lelich led the charge into Aizen's domain and the other teams quickly followed suit, one by one. When they emerged they were greeted by a far outstretching landscape with rocky cliffs, indescribable abominations of nature, and a dark, starlit sky with a bright full moon. A tall castle was far off in the distance and it was really large even from the distance the group was at. Rita scratched her head. Aizen, you make it hard not to go straight for the compensation jokes when you build needlessly large structures. First Las Noches, now this. Those near her that got the joke laughed. Remember the plan. Lelich shouted. Let's go. And with that the invasion had begun. Far in the back of his large castle, on the top floor, Aizen sat in his cushy, throne-like room, sipping tea and sitting on a couch large enough for Jidanbo to lounge on. Naira sat on his lap and he was stroking her hair as if she were his pet. He had the gigantic penthouse suite wall-sized screen in front of him split into many screens. Here they come, he said. He took a particularly loud sip of his tea. He had his monitor switch to one giant screen and focus on Lelich. Come and get me, Lamperouge Lelich, he told him. I'm waiting. Naira growled from her seat and Aizen took another sip of tea and smirked as widely as he could. To be continued. Chapter 203, Lelich vs Aizen, The Invasion. Artificial Dimension. Rushing at the front of her group, Vera cleaved through the abominations of Aizen dumb enough to get in her path. She slashed one in half at the waistline, rushed forward and slashed another one in half cutting down from the shoulder towards the waist before performing a jump attack and splitting open the skull of the next enemy in her path. She then licked the blood that splashed onto the back of her hand before pivoting and decapitating a zombie-like abomination that just sprouted up out of the ground. Chikami Sorai. Vera unleashed her Shikai and sent it flying outward, cleaving a whole group of creatures headed for her location. In the next instant a very large creature rose up in front of Vera with big arms and horns on top of its head with a black body. Before Vera could mount a defense even mentally, the creature was slashed twice and disappeared as Shunsui dropped down in front of her and doffed his umbrella to her. Meanwhile, Lelich was firing Shakkeiho blasts as he stood alongside Waiwak, who was firing arrows, trying to find out exactly what Ryukin had said to convince him to come along. Originally I didn't want to sacrifice my entire nation for a cause I didn't feel was worth fighting for. With every passing generation the Quincy population doesn't seem to be growing any larger. We're too spread out. Seriously? I would have thought you would have flourished in the last 40 or so years. Many, like Ryukin, choose not to become hardened Quincy's and defend their children from their heritage. It is their choice, but we are far from becoming a dying breed as long as there are those of us devoted to becoming what we are, Waiwak stated as he fired off a bolt and eliminated 20 abominations about 20 meters ahead. So what brought you here? What did Ryukin say? He heard from Urayu about your battle plan. He asked if I was willing to go with him with 4 of my best to fight Aizen. After what happened with Kurosaki Ichigo 10 years ago, he did not want to have something happen to his son. Lelich looked over to where Urayu was firing non-stop to provide cover fire for Tatsuki and Kigo in case they missed anything as Ichigo and Rukia brought up the rear and Chad watching the group's back. Urayu was dead set focused on what was going on around him. He really has grown in with that group. I'm surprised. He's nothing like his father, Waiwak commented as he took a pause from shooting. Don't change the subject, Lelich said, nodding to his ally as they rushed ahead to gain more ground before opening fire again. You said you brought 4 of your best elite with you? 3 of them I can understand, but that one woman is around Arisawa's age. I don't doubt she's a good soldier, but she's one of your elite, really. Waiwak simply grinned and pointed yonder to where Bambietta was standing in the middle of a ravine as ghouls of varying builds and color rushed her. With pinpoint accuracy, a steady trigger finger and swift, fluid motions, she fired and eliminated each of Aizen's drones before proceeding onward. Forget I said anything, Lelich said, retracting his statement. Waiwak simply smirked. Before the 2 men could proceed onward, the ground began to shake as a huge dragon began flying high overhead, roaring. It was dark-colored and adorned with some rather unfriendly-looking, needle-proportioned spikes. "That doesn't look good," Senna commented. It might be big, but it ain't strong. Watch and learn, Senna-chan." Jin readied his Zanpakuto. "Shoot to kill, Shinso." Jin extended his blade out and, with a fearsome swing, severed the beast's head off its shoulders as its flight pattern passed through Jin's swing. "Nice shot, Jin." Lelich hollered from a higher altitude as he ran by the grinning captain. Elsewhere on the ground, Byakuya commented, "This is so tedious." "Perhaps that's Aizen's plan," Hisuna said as she ran by him and lashed out her whip to lash aside a creature in her way, her superior Ryotsu killing it on impact, wear us down and take advantage of our exhaustion. "How cowardly," Byakuya scoffed. "Since when has Aizen ever played fair?" Kyan said, half rolling his eyes. "Focus!" Yuna exclaimed in irritation. "If you can spend time chit-chatting on things, use it to communicate to battle more effectively." She leapt over Byakuya and Hisuna, using both their shoulders as a temporary platform, and brought her sword right down through the face of an invisible horror as it disintegrated. "Keep your Ryotsu senses on high alert. If you lose your focus, it could mean an injury, and we don't have time for emergency stops, not this early in the game." Hisuna nodded, but Byakuya had to complain. "The next time you're going to use my shoulder as a foothold, a little advance notice would be nice." "I'll remember that next time and use you as a human shield next," Yuna commented as she used Byakurai over her shoulder to skewer a zombie right between the eyes. As anyone could expect, Kenpei was having the time of his life as he ran headlong like a fearless fool, laughing and smiling as enemies simply exploded from his large Ryotsu. "Aizen!" he shouted with glee. In his abode, Aizen took note of this. "He's making far more progress than I would like. I should fix that." "Kenpei," Lelich called. "You're too far ahead in this phase. Stick with the group." Kenpei was, unfortunately, not listening as he continued to charge forward with his manic grin driving him forward with visceral joy as enemies blew up around him like geysers of lava. In his abode though, Aizen snapped his fingers and, suddenly, a Hado 90, fully powered, began to form upon Kenpei's location. "Kenpei!" Lelich called in warning. Kenpei was alive, but he was injured after an attack like that, bleeding profusely from an uncountable amount of wounds. "Kairanji!" Rita shouted. On it, the Royal Guard member stated and rushed to Kenpei's location, healing him with a simple tap to the man's wounds. "Well, hey, my wounds are gone," Kenpei said with a grin. "Be careful," Kairanji told him as he stood around, preparing to wait for his group. "Aizen's got full control of his area. I might not be able to completely bail you out of the next trap." "Kenny, are you alright?" Yachiro called, running up the road. "He'll be fine, watch his back. That's your job, remember." Kenny was having so much fun that he just ran ahead of me. Yachiro then saluted. "Don't worry about Kenny. He'll be fine as long as I'm watching him." "Kenpei." Lelich caught up with him and Yachiro as the rest of Kenpei's group and Lelich's group began to reach the spot. "I advise using your Shikai now. If you take damage it'll power you up. Aizen can handle your full power. You tussled with Vanguard who was number 8. Aizen was number 2 and now he's more powerful than even Rita. Surely you can figure out simple math like that." "We'll alright then," Kenpei grinned. "You guys go on ahead then. I don't want my Ryotsu crushing you." "Thanks for being a team player," Lelich told him. "I knew I could count on you. Hey, I'm just looking for a good fight and right now everything around here is boring. Besides, I wanna make sure Ichigo's doing alright." Lelich nodded. "Alright, let's move team." He and his allies moved forward. On another pathway, Talbumasuk had his group following closely behind him as they all ran at a similar pace, spread out in a star pattern with Talbumasuk at the head and Mia in the center. As they ran together they were suddenly affronted by a giant human-shaped zombie with a wrecking ball for one arm and a curved blade in place of its other hand. Its body was also leaking acid. It stood several stories tall. "Grimjo, if you would," Talbumasuk said, sticking his hands in his pockets. Grimjo grinned, happy to take down such a large enemy. Zero. He blasted the top half of the body right off. He chuckled as he saw the damage. Ha ha ha, there's nothing like some mindless destruction of blasting something to smithereens. Quite, Talbumasuk stated before nodding to Neliel, who activated her Pesquius. We're good, she told him. All right then. The group proceeded onward. Kazumi's group made continuous progress, with Kazumi using her claws to hack and slash her way through opponents with no effort at all, with Senna's Shikai already active doing her best to keep up with her niece. She discharged her fist into a particularly nasty-looking zombie that had a mouth for a stomach and a large, blue tongue that was liquid in consistency. Gross. Is Aizen trying to scare us? This is pathetic. It's the Book of Volcarona. He's unleashed its true potential, crazy bastard, Kazumi said gruffly. What's that mean? Jin asked. It means we should be careful. His defenses are every possible summon that book has, which amounts to a lot of dangerous and pretty nasty creatures. Nothing you can't handle though, right? Senna asked. The point of you being with me, Kazumi said as Renji, Tissen, and Halibal caught up, is to minimize my use of my power so I can conserve it for Aizen. Renji, take the next charge, I'll cover you. Right, on it. Renji said, charging forward. He ran ahead of the group while Kazumi slowed her pace down to keep in line with Senna and Jin. Renji ran forward only to stumble across a large being that was shaped like a castle, only about 1/1000 the size of Aizen's domain. It had one arm and intended to pound Renji into the ground with it. The creature had no lower body. Renji blocked successfully with his blade. Zabumaru. He attacked the creature with his Zanpakuto, but it clanged against the hard rock used to make up the creature's body with minimal effect. What? Move. Renji was surprised when he saw Ashido right behind him. Defend the pack, Mio Okamai. He whipped out his blade and slashed off the creature's fingers. Mio no Arashi. Ashido moved faster than Renji could follow, as slash upon slash was visible before he saw the whole stone creature crumble before his eyes as Ashido landed behind the rubble and sheathed his blade, now Reseo led, with an audible click. Nice one, Kano senpai. My Zanpakuto was simply suited to this task. If you used your Bankai it would have had the same effect. I took care of 2 other creatures like that and sensed another one over this way. My group is on the same path as yours. Luscateiko asked me to scout out ahead. If you can't keep at my pace, I'll slow down to your level. With your strength and my skill we could make effective leads. Yeah, Renji nodded in agreement. Renji and Ashido's team-up was noticed by Rukia as she and Ichigo ran by. Kazumi and Luscateiko's group appear to be at 100% still, she told Ichigo. Alright, that's good, Ichigo said, still running with Shikai released, blade held behind his back like when he'd been charging through Hueco Mundo after Orium. Rukia, you have a Kido right that can tell people you want to talk to messages. Ah, yeah, Tentiakura, wait, how did you know about that? Rita gave me lessons, Ichigo said as he then glanced up. I couldn't grasp basic theory, but she showed me how to watch out for them and what they do. I didn't just practice my technique with her. I can't perform a Tentiakura on the fly. It's beyond my capabilities. If Katetsu Fukutaiko was nearby. Ichigo spit at the ground in irritation. Damn. Why, what's the matter? Ichigo didn't respond to Rukia. He just called out. Ishida. Uriah flew by on his Reishi-made surfboard. What is it? Double back to Lelich with a message. What sort of message? Tell him I'm going on ahead with Rukia. What? By yourself. If I can clear a clean path it'll make it easier for the others. If I have Rukia I can patch my injuries and I can use my Bankai if I start to get low on Ryutsu. I'll be fine. I'll be quick, Uriah said and took off. Ichigo, are you sure about this? Rukia asked. Rukia, I want this to be over as soon as possible, Ichigo said as Orium crossed his mind, and how the more time Aizen stayed a threat the longer she could be in potential danger and the more chances the man could have at Ichigo's life. Orium is counting on me and so are a lot of you to do my part. Now come on, Ichigo extended his arm behind him, palm open, grab hold. Rukia grabbed hold of Ichigo's arm and he hoisted her up onto his back as he held his sword at his sword and changed to Bankai. Now hold on tight. I don't want to drop you, Ichigo said and called out. Tatsuki. Kigo. You called. Kigo said, reaching relatively close to Ichigo. What's up? Tatsuki said, lowering her altitude and flying in close. I'm going ahead, back me with some cover fire. Not a problem, Tatsuki told him. You got it, Kigo answered at the same time. Ichigo charged forward using his Bankai's speed to gain a leg up with Tatsuki firing her flaming balls of energy from a high altitude to take out anything in Ichigo's path so he could focus on running while Kigo hit anything she missed though he couldn't follow Ichigo as well. Uriah said he would be quick and he was as he managed to make it to Chad's location who continued to watch the groups back from the rear as he angled his bow upwards and shouted. Lick Dragon. Ichigo watched the enormous volley of arrows go soaring overhead and bury a whole wall of enemies into the dirt in front of him. Aizen, I'm gunning for you. We aren't finished from last time. This time when we fight, you're going down and if my blade isn't the last one to strike you it will definitely have the intent of one. Farther back, Yuna's group was making steady progress. Kurosaka just made a clean dash ahead. What? How? Kayan asked. I think I know, Yuna noted, Byakuya. I need heavy blade support, pronto. By your command, Homura Teiko, Byakuya said, releasing his Bankai and rushing the blades past her, felling hordes of enemies in front of her as he then nodded to Rangiku who followed up what his Bankai left alive with her ash. Come on Susanna. Yuna called to her second. Right behind you, Teiko. Susanna stated as she and her captain rushed forward. Aizen's domain. Aizen motioned to get up from his couch. Naira, feeling this, jumped down off his lap onto the floor. Naira, Aizen said as he began to walk away, I will be right back. Please only come find me if there is any change to the situation. Naira barked affirmatively in response. Aizen walked out into the hall and then turned a corner and stepped onto a transport pad where he was now in a room that had no natural walls or floors. It was just a room full of twisting black and green neon colors. CC sat on the ground in this room, still tied up. She was still bound with her arms behind her back and her legs tied together. Finally figuring out how useless I am as a hostage. She asked. Aizen said nothing. They're coming for me aren't they? Indeed and I think it's about time I made my move, Aizen stated. What are you talking about? CC asked with a dull stare. Aizen's hand glowed with a violet light as he outstretched it towards CC. The coat on her head glowed and began to burn. She cried out in pain a slight bit. I figured out the other day how to do this. It was simply just a matter of when. Lelich and the others won't arrive for several hours. By that point, I'll have already set up the part you are to play. And no. Stop, CC protested. Her forehead was on fire as she could feel Aizen stealing her code. Why are you resisting? Don't you want to die? Aizen asked, pulling harder as CC's forehead began to pull open in the shape of her code. And no, CC uttered with tremendous effort, I want to live. Lies are unbecoming of you, Brina McLean. How do you know that name? CC whimpered. You and I are currently connected through your code. Your history, your immortality, your memory, all of it is at my disposal. Stop it. Stop it. CC pleaded. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I can't do that, Aizen said as he pressed his hand firmly into CC's forehead, which began to burn as smoke rose up from it like her head had just caught fire. CC shouted out in dire pain, whipping her head back. Aizen cupped her chin and looked at her tearful eyes as her code began glow brighter and brighter. You are mine, Miss CC. Your code, your history, your life. No, stop, CC pleaded weakly as the glow grew brighter and brighter. No. The intense glow began to burn as the cracking of her forehead grew wider as blood poured from it like a broken dam. Nua! She shouted in pain as her code was agonizingly removed. Stop it! She cried out. Stop it! I beg you! I don't want to lose my code. Not anymore. Lelich made me want to live again. Please. CC continued to plead. Her code began to vanish as the it began to appear on Aizen's palm. No. She shouted again. I want to lie CC shouted as her code was ripped from her body. In moments it was all over and she fell forward, blood trickling from her forehead. She couldn't move, couldn't feel anything. Her body was numb. Without her code she couldn't even sense Aizen in front of her nor have any sensory input from all around her. The wound in her forehead was shallow. Even without medical treatment it would eventually close up and scar over. She wouldn't die even from blood loss. No, I didn't want to go, like this. I'm not done living. A tear formed in Cece's right eye as she watched her code appear on Aizen's forehead as her spiritual pressure finally left her body. For once, the green-haired witch begged for someone to save her. Lelouch, help me. Aizen's castle, front entrance. After hours upon hours of zombie, demon, and abomination slaying action, the proper combatants had made it to Aizen's front gates, all 26 of them. The other 52 combatants were still outside doing their best to make their way towards the tower as possible backup, but also to make a clean path out of the dimension once Aizen was defeated. Aizen's tower stood so ridiculously high that his enemies couldn't even see the top as they stood in front of the front gates, which were almost as tall as the double doors leading into Circle 9. Yup, definitely compensating for something, Rita said as she folded her arms, Zanpakuto clenched in one hand. So, do we knock or? Kensei interrupted Rukia's inquiry by punching a hole straight through the door with his Bankai, which was already active, allowing someone even as big as Jidanbo to walk through. How's that for a knock? Everyone entered into Aizen's grand foyer and found multiple twisting staircases and doors upon doors upon doors. Yup, this has Aizen's idea of aesthetics written all over it, Lelouch commented. It's more for tactical confusion than it is actual aesthetics, Talbumasuk stated, knowing Aizen better. So, should we split up? Kendra questioned. No, let me, Kazumi stated and stepped forward. Her eyes flashed black for a moment as the world around her turned red. She could now see the pathways the multiple locations and stairs led to and tried to connect how many of them actually led to the top. She was surprised to find that they all did. Her eyes returned to their normal color. It's a ruse. No matter what path we pick, they lead to the top. However, my illusion immune sight can't discern if there are traps on the way up. Not all the paths are linear, but they all lead to the top eventually. So what do you suggest? Lelouch asked. Some of the pathways become narrow enough that they make traveling as one big group impossible. It is best we split up for practicality's sake, since not all of us run at the same speed. Also, Kazumi began her sentence but trailed off. Rita stepped up next to her. Yes, I feel it too, she said. As do I, Talbumasuk stated. Besides just Aizen, Naira is waiting for us as well. Lelouch, thoughts? Anohana asked him. Lelouch pondered for a moment how to proceed from here. He wondered if it was a good idea if he told the seconds that their job was done and that those who should fight Aizen should take it from here. With Naira along the pathway, that would mean whoever ran into her would have to leave their second behind to fight her, and only Shudera actually stood a chance at winning should that happen. The others would be screwed, and he wasn't about to sacrifice Momo or Susanna to fight his greatest foe. True, Naira might be able to be persuaded if one could stay outside her attack range to join their side, but he couldn't take the risk that whoever faced her might not be fast enough to react to her or try such a tactic, and even then, Yachiru, Mia, and Cornelia couldn't pull that tactic off. Aizen might not be as smart as Lelouch or Urahara, but he was still a tactical mastermind. As long as there was a weakness, he would exploit it. Lelouch had come to suspect that Aizen knew they were coming and knew who was where. The obstacles along the way had been too coincidental, too precise for things to be otherwise. Everyone who needs to fight Aizen should proceed onward. Seconds, stay back and guard the entrance. Sensei, are you sure? Momo asked him. Yes. I don't want any of you to be sacrificed. Knowing Aizen, he'll send Naira to confront a team that she has an absolute chance of killing, like Stefan's, and even if a fighter were to leave their second behind, only Shudera stands a chance against her. So then I should come with then, Shudera stated. But that will force Aizen onto your team, Marianne pointed out. Or he could go after Stefan and ensure his defeat, Lelouch stated. That's not the Aizen I know, Talbumasuk pointed out. And what do you think he might do? Lelich asked. Talbumasuk stepped forward and looked up. I agree that Aizen will send Naira after we've chosen our pathways, but he doesn't consider any of us an actual threat. Also, he wants you and Ichigo to fight him. If your seconds come with you, they'll be safe, though other abominations may plague all of our teams. So then do you have a suggestion? Lelich asked. Not so much a suggestion as I do have an estimate of who Aizen would send after us depending on what we do. Shudera, Momo, Rukia, Soifone, Cornelia, and Mia will go forward with us. Are you sure? Lelich asked. Yes, Talbumasuk nodded. Like this I've only put one team in danger. The rest are just because I know Aizen won't attack them or I know of a way that team can slip past Naira without having to fight her. And by not saying which is which you have Aizen in a pickle trying to outsmart you, clever, Yuki commented. Well, I did learn from the man, Talbumasuk said with a grin, tapping a finger to his forehead. Beyond this, Lelich stated, trying to think of a more guaranteed success plan, Kazumi, can you point out a linear pathway? Without even asking why, Kazumi pointed to a door at the far end of the room. Kenpei, you'll take that route. That way you won't get lost and you have the chance of making it to Aizen first. Kenpei grinned at Lelich's suggestion. Are we good then? Waiwak asked. We are, unless our Suteiko has anything to add. I believe we are good for now. All right, everyone pick a pathway, Lelich ordered. Each single or pair stood in front of a staircase or doorway and then Lelich looked back at Senna, Susanna, Vera, Mashiro, Hashwalt, Yachiro, and Kendra. It'll be up to you to hold the fort in and outside the castle. Decide amongst yourselves who's doing what. Lelich then looked at Anohana, silently communicating to her. She nodded and then said, without glancing back, Vera-chan, you're in charge. Understood, Vera responded. The 13 teams intending to fight Aizen then took off through their respective paths, leaving their 7 allies behind. Hashwalt-san, go outside with Otamaka Fukutaiko and a Tremere Fukutaiko. I'll stay in here with the others. Understood. Hashwalt exited the building with the other 2 vice captains. Are they all going to be okay? Susanna asked Vera. All we can do is have faith in them, Vera told her, and pray that they'll come out alive. Speaking of coming out alive, we've got company, Mashiro said as Aizen's unintelligent spawn began to appear. All right then, let's do this, Vera stated. Bankai. Lelich and Momo's pathway. Lelich and Momo were having the most luck out of the 13 chosen paths. It was clear to Lelich that Aizen wanted them both there. He was only sending out several abominations per pathway. Only enough to slow them down, but not enough to cause a problem. As Lelich and Momo hacked down another pair of abominations, Momo struck up a conversation. Why did you ask me to be your second, sensei? She asked. Lelich hacked down a zombie. Because I knew you'd be safe with me. Aizen wants me alive so he can kill me personally. But what about Susanna-chan? She's your wife. She's safer with Yuna. Aizen wouldn't consider Yuna a threat and if he can't make Susanna die in front of me he's not going to try it, or so Talbumasuk told me and the fact that he had her stay behind means he's banking on Aizen believing that Yuna isn't a threat to him. Momo frowned as she used Tobium's Shikai to clear out a path of shadowy humanoid figures. I wish I had your intelligence and planning skills, sensei. But you're learning though. If you temper yourself you could become just like me. You already think the same way I do in most respects. All it requires after that is research and tactical understanding and you can only get that with time. Lelich killed another abomination, you're my best student Momo, he killed another one with his Shikai's fireball. That's why I need you at my side. They continued to run as no enemies were in their path. Zero is an image that can't die no matter what. He is a symbol, not a being. If something were to befall me someone has to pick up the mantle. He looked at Momo with an expression of pride. I told you before, you're the only one worthy of carrying on that legacy. Momo flushed a little in flattery. That's, I'm. You have what it takes. You may not think you do, but if you were to try, if you had no other choice but to wear the helmet and take my place, I know you could do it. Sensei, Momo smiled warmly as she ran a little bit behind him. You are my deputy here in the Soul Society, Momo. And if I don't make it, it's up to you to fill in the void I will leave behind to the people of the Rokanga. And so, consider this your final exam, Lelich told her. I'll be watching you as we go to make sure I made the right decision. You have grown so much in the last 70 years and I've watched you do so either up close or from afar. Since the first time I considered you my apprentice, I've never decided anyone was more deserving of that title than you. Lelich reached a door and held the handle as he extended his arm down to Momo, who stopped a few steps behind him. So come, Momo. As the successor to my will, should anything befall me, I request, no, I order you to come with me. We will show Aizen what it means to be a miracle worker. Yes, Momo said with a serious, vigorous expression and clamped hold of Lelich's hand. Rita and Shudder's pathway. Tatsumaki. Rita's tornado blasted apart an entire room full of abominations, leaving Shudder to pick up any stragglers. As the Royal Guard member wrenched open the next door, Rita followed in silence. She and Shudder hadn't spoken a word to each other. It was possible that the black-haired woman still held a grudge for long ago. Rita had really fucked up back then and she'd killed a lot of people. Shudder might still be mad, or think of Rita as some sort of monster, Rita figured, especially given what the warden knew was being spread about her by the Soul King. Why Shudder had been asked to be her second rather than the more amiable Asho, the slightly crazy Nimeya, or the at least somewhat understanding Kairanji was beyond her. Rita had at least one theory though. Shudder was the only member of the Royal Guard who refused to put up with nonsense. She was cautious, calculating and often chastised the others for having too much fun or not taking things seriously. Shudder was a woman who didn't like to waste time and always did things logically. Rita began comparing Shudder to herself, but realized there was one big difference between the way Shudder was and the way Rita used to be. Shudder had always understood the value of life and still knew how to take things easy. While she kept up her serious demeanor, Shudder still knew how to relax and she still valued the company of others. Rita, after becoming a Soul Reaper, was always so focused on getting stronger, on becoming the Soul Society's protector. She hardly ever attended social gatherings and she rarely interacted with others. Rita began guilt-tripping herself as she reminded herself for the umpteenth time how much of a jerk she had been back in the day. Sure, she'd mellowed out considerably since then, but it was a desperate attempt of a struggle for sanity. She'd been all alone in hell with the only company being her Zanpakuto and other Togabito. Her only connection to the outside world was the Soul King on certain occasions. It had changed Rita's iron personality, softened her up, a coping mechanism because if she didn't try to make her own fun she'd certainly go crazy. As the two ran up another staircase, Rita trailing behind, she wondered if it was best if she broke the ice. As the duo reached the other end of the staircase, Shudder used one of her artificial limbs to open the door as she and Rita entered inside. More abominations, another room full of them. Methodically Rita let loose a watered-down Kurohitsuji in order to take care of her and Shudder's enemies. As she approached the door though, she stopped. Shudder, not wanting to waste time, extended two arms out. One pushed Rita away from the handle with a slight push, the other opened the door. Hey, Senjimaru, Rita said, calling Shudder by her given name. If you want to talk, do so while we move, Shudder responded coldly as the pair continued onward. Is there a reason you haven't said anything to me? Rita wanted to know. Do you resent me? Shudder didn't answer her. How can I resent someone who has never opened her heart to me to begin with? Shudder asked. The statement caught Rita off guard as her furry ears perked up. We were only comrades superficially, back in the day you never really cared about anyone. You did your duty, you fought, and you trained. I admired such an attitude, but you distanced yourself from all of us. You acted as though you shouldn't get close to us. Feluca had told us that life just recycled. I questioned why I should have friends at all if people are just going to die and that their deaths would just be used to keep a constant balance between two worlds. Even my own life didn't mean much to me. So you closed your heart. You stayed away from us not out of spite, but out of necessity. You were afraid of getting hurt. Feluca's words hurt your soul. Rita stared at her feet as she trekked up the stairs. Every time I wanted to be friends with you all, I just kept telling myself it was only temporary, that we are all just a big part of this life cycle, that even our own lives didn't matter in the long run. Rita, there's something you should know about that way of thinking, Shudera stated as she and Rita entered into the next room, finding a large amount of abominations waiting for them. Shudera and Rita got busy, using only their Hakuta skills. If you go through life worried about the deaths of those you care about and do nothing except alienate them because they're going to leave you eventually, you miss out on one important aspect of life. What do you mean? Life and death are part of the same coin. If death did not exist, there could be no life. The point of life is not to worry about death that comes at the end, but to enjoy the life you lead and experience it to the fullest. Rita hadn't expected to hear that from someone like Shudera. She said nothing and continued to listen. I watched you for a long time as I did the others. There is a fine balance between enjoyment and duty. The more efficient and quicker you complete what it is you have to do, the more time you can spend unwinding and taking things easy. Shudera used her artificial limbs to destroy the enemies around her and now had a direct line of sight at Rita, who bashed an abomination's head in with her staff. You never once enjoyed life, and that is the difference between you and me. Shudera used her arms to fire a plethora of Kido to destroy the remaining enemies before grappling one towards the door. She then walked towards Rita and extended her natural arm to her. A friend is someone who you can trust and who you care about. There aren't many in your life, true companions. I always thought of how sad and depressing that was, because you always seemed like a person I could truly understand and connect with. So how about it, Rita? Friends, for real. Rita was moved by what Shudera was saying. She smiled and shook her hand vigorously. Yes. She exclaimed with a warm smile. Shudera then pulled open the door only to see what was behind it. As Naira stepped through the door, the pathway stepped in shadows. Naira was on all fours, her invisible arms ready to strike at a moment's notice. Rita readied her staff in reluctance, but Shudera pushed down on it with one of her arms. I think this is what we all expected, Rita. I'll handle Naira, you go forward. She's a Togabito. It's my responsibility, Rita said solemnly. Look at her, Rita. What do you mean? She's as she always is when she's defensive. No, I mean really look at her. Rita furrowed her brow, but looked yonder at Naira, who was giving a dark, hateful look the likes of which Rita had never seen before. However, her posture indicated something else entirely. That girl is crying on the inside, Shudera told Rita. I know. I didn't want to make her what she is, but she was too dangerous to leave around the Soul Society. I know. Her Ryotsu is this fierce on its own. At the time you had to put her away, the Godei could not handle her. She has suffered, but she's suppressed it. But look at her. On the outside she is loyal to Aizen, but on the inside she wants the pain to stop. She sees you and knows the desperate struggle she has. She wants to be with Aizen, for it will set her free, but she knows the consequences and chances of failure. So then what can I? You are to do as you are told and go face Aizen. I'll handle Naira, Shudera stated. But if she is defeated as she is, she will be released from your custody. Her soul will get to be reincarnated even as it dies in this horrible place, unless you are the one to defeat her. As your friend, let me set her free, Rita. Rita stared at Naira and saw the pain in her eyes behind the hateful scowl, but she also saw something else, a deep darkness rooted deep within the girl. Naira, what has Aizen done to you? The mission of the Soul Reapers was always to protect His Majesty and the Soul Society, even at the cost of our lives. Rita, go. I'll handle her. All right, Rita said, mounting her staff like it was a witch's broom. Just get her out of the way. I don't think that will be an issue, Shudera said as her arms retracted behind her and a sword hilt poked itself upwards from behind her back. The blade clicked out its sheath. Shudera grabbed hold of it and whipped it down at her side before holding it up in front of her eyes with her right hand. It had been a long time since she'd needed her Zanpakuto. Even during Kazumi's attack on Earth she only needed her bare fists, her artificial limbs and her Kido. She looked at the weapon's fine craftsmanship as the blade shimmered with polish while reflecting her eyes along the flat end of it. It had a golden handle, guard, and pommel with all three pieces joined together and shaped like a rectangular grail. Along the base of the blade's sharp end, the guard extended upward like a mass of twisted vines. My sword, it's been a long time. Shudder's riots irradiated as she held her blade with her right hand and turned the blade end towards her. She placed her left hand in her artificial limbs along the flat end of the blade. Spin your web, Kyotai Oko Kumo. Orb Weaver Spider. Shudder's blade turned bone white when it suddenly branched out into a gigantic spider web in seconds that then caught fire and disappeared, along with Shudder's Zanpakuto handle. However, in the next instant, Shudder bent her arm forward vigorously, fist still open slightly as if she was still holding a sword, and a thick cluster of webbing shot out in the hole in her fist and attached itself to Naira's face. With a swing of her arm she threw Naira into the wall. Go! She shouted at Rita, who took off. Naira reached out for Rita with her invisible arm, but Shudder had anticipated such a tactic and managed to clamp hold of Naira's arm with the web shooting out of one of her artificial arms. Rita escaped to continue her battle. Naira rushed forward towards Shudder, but with webbing shaped like fists and blades, or even just giant balls of webs fired out, Shudder managed to avoid Naira's assault and then spun a web in front of the door Rita had escaped through. If you want to chase after her, then you're going to need to go through me, Shudder said with a slight smile as she clasped each pair of her hands together. Bankai! Shudder disappeared into a tower of webbing that formed and hardened around her before one of her artificial arms punched a hole in it and she stepped through it. Shudder now had spider-like legs growing out of her back as she hoisted herself up on two of them. She also had an artificial thorax growing down from where they were connected. Her artificial attached limbs were still present, and they, and her natural arms, now had a serrated blade extended off the backs of the wrists, each as sharp and wide as a carving knife. Kyojin Kyotai Oko Kumoju. Goliath Orb Weaver Spider Queen. With no less than 18 limbs at her disposal compared to Naira's 4, with considerably more reach, the battle unfolding would answer a question of quantity over quality. To be continued. Check the description for the links to the author.